You know what? I'll start a little early today. Yeah, I had to schedule at 11, but you know what? I'm just sitting here twiddling my fingers going, what do I need to wait 10 more minutes? Plus my mod's over there going, hey, Steve, you just go ahead and start streaming. And I have to listen to her because I'm kind of scared of her just a little bit. Just a little bit. She's very intimidating. I love her to death, but she's formidable.
Love you too.
Thank you, baby. All right. So anyways, it is Easter weekend. Yes, it is. And I thought it was a good time for a discussion on some things that I've talked about before, but I really haven't really gone into too much detail. And if people really care, I was going to kind of share some things with you guys today on why I'm not a Christian. Today is Easter. What is it? Easter Vigil, they call it today, right? The Saturday before Easter. It is a special, like, liturgical holiday that represents, like, when people come to full communion with Christ. I'm not a theologian. I don't pay attention to any of those things. I don't know the details of the Roman Catholic Church or the what do they call catechumens or whatever the full communion is. I know nothing about the Catholic Church as far as their the liturgy and the Lent and all that. So I really don't. I just honestly don't even care that much. But one thing that seems to be very similar among all the religious sects of Christianity is the divinity of Christ and the resurrection of Christ, which of course Easter Sunday is the celebration of Christ being put in the tomb, being entombed, and supposedly rising 3 days later, right? Well, obviously people know that I'm agnostic. So being agnostic, I do not have a belief that God exists. I reserve judgment on that. I suspend judgment. I don't have a belief either way. However, there are certain things I do have specific beliefs on. For example, I am a local atheist towards certain types of gods. I will tell you, I believe Zeus does not exist. I believe Vishnu does not exist. I believe that most interpretations of Christians' gods do not exist when it comes to the Judeo-Christianic deity named Yahweh. That particular version that I hear that a lot of Christians talk about, at least most of the version they talk about, I don't believe that particular God exists for the most part. Now, there might be versions that I am reserving judgment on because I'm a global agnostic, right? I'm saying that I don't say there are no gods. I just think that certain variations of what I hear Christians tell me of their particular version of God, I'll say it's more than just I don't believe. I will say that I believe that they're wrong, and one of the reasons is because it's nonsensical to me, or at least morally egregious. And let me tell you why. So, like just the other day on Twitter, there was a theologian who had put something along the lines of, if you don't believe in hell, you're going to go to hell. Basically, it's more real than reality is basically what they're saying. So they're like, look, if you don't accept this notion that there's a hell, you're damned to it. And I myself, as a thinking agent, as somebody that if God created me in some kind of likeness, wants me to have some intelligence to reason, I have to sit there and go, well, why would a God that's that omnipotent, that omnibenevolent, and that omnipotent predicate the eternity, right? Eternal damnation merely upon a belief, whether you accept if there's a hell or not. And by the way, that's a weird thing because it's supposed to be on the belief that Christ is the risen Lord, mostly, right? If John 3:16, whoever believe in Christ, we have forever be saved and eternal life and all that. So I thought it was odd that this person was saying, look, if you don't believe in hell, you're damned to it. I'm like, well, how is that even scriptorial? And again, I don't want to get into eschatology or stereology because I don't know shit all about theology. I'm not a theologian. I don't really care about it. But there's certain things about when it comes to philosophy that I do know a little bit about, and ethics is one of them. And I don't find that to be an ethical God that says, oh, you don't believe there's a hell? Well, you're going there. Okay, well, hey, look, I could say I don't believe in Cancun. Can I go there? It doesn't work that way. And so, yeah, I deny that there's a hell. I deny that there's a place that there's going to be eternal suffering for, eternity. One, I find it difficult to even imagine what eternity would be. But I do subscribe to the notion that nothing would be ethical to say you're damned for eternity for any kind of finite crime that you did. I don't accept that. I just don't think that's an ethical thing. Now, I grant why people do want there to be some kind of justice. I understand that. And I get, that feeling. I want vindication. I want retribution myself. I'm not Jesus. I don't have to forgive people. And if there's a sixth level of hell or a ninth level of hell, yeah, sure. I can understand why some of us want people to go there. But there's a difference between having some kind of retribution and then just conscious eternal torment that I believe doesn't exist. So yeah, it's hyperbolic language, right? I would never want even my worst enemy to be suffering for eternity. And I wouldn't even want somebody that I care about to be suffering for even a limited amount of time, which is one of the things about Christianity that always kind of bothered me. Because if Christ is the Son of God, whether he's the Son of God, which either means that he's literally the Son of God, which hasn't really made much sense to me, or a God incarnate and somehow based upon the Trinitarian concept, which never made sense to me. Even when I was a Christian, people know I was baptized Mormon in the, when was that? 1987, I believe I was baptized Mormon. It was just before I went in the Navy. And people can argue whether Mormons are Christians or not. I believe they're Christians. If you don't believe that, I don't care. It's irrelevant to me. But the point being is that, there's the different beliefs about the Trinitarian concepts, right? Whether God is the Son or God is Jesus himself, right? There are three aspects. It never made sense to me. So even as a Christian, I didn't get the concept of Christ being somehow related to God. It just never made any sense to me. Even though I was a Christian, I was baptized Mormon. I was like, okay, I'll figure it out or whatever. I just kind of went along with the ride kind of stuff. But it wasn't until I got older and I started reading more about these things and going, okay, some of these things are just not making sense to me. And so obviously I think the Trinitarian concept is incoherent. It's just, it cannot be. It's an impossibility the way most of it's stated. As a matter of fact, most of the way the Trinitarian concepts are looked at from the Nicene Creed are itself heretical to churches, right? I mean, modalism is heretical. Mysterianism is heretical. I think, every single version of the Trinitarian concepts somebody finds heretical. So why does it matter whether you believe Jesus is the Son of God or not? And so if I can't accept certain things out of logically that are inconsistent to me, why is that something that should be damnable? Why would God predicate being damned, right? Damning somebody just because they don't accept something that it should be irrelevant as far as salvation issues, right? I mean, why would an all-powerful God say, look, believe my son is the Son of God or you're screwed? Makes no sense to me. And obviously, with the different variations of the accounts of the eyewitnesses, and again, I'm not going to get into the biblical scriptures, but there are variations in the story. And unless you see something firsthand, it's just like any other text to me. It's these people may or may not think they saw something. I have no idea, but I would evaluate it just like I would anything else. If somebody says, "Hey, look, we've seen this object in the sky," okay, maybe you did. What was it? I have no idea. Could have been a UFO. Yeah, it was a UFO. If you don't know what it was, that's what UFO means: unidentified flying object. But was it of extraterrestrial origin? Well, probably not, but there's no way to determine if it's just unidentified, right? We're finding a lot of things that are just birds or, astronomic effects. There's things we've learned about meteorological conditions that we didn't realize before, like sprites and jets and Steves and things of that nature. They're called literally Steves. But as far as religiosity and the accepting of Christ as far as being Christian, there's just a lot of things as I grew older to stop making sense to me. And as I learned more, it stopped making sense to me. And of course, people knew I left the church in 2008, give or take, because in California, there was something called Prop 8, which was the enactment of legislation to try to prevent gay marriage. And I just couldn't grasp by a church, by the LDS church, was involving themselves into politics, especially like that. And I had found out that the LDS church had been heavily involved. It was called preparative therapy. They had an organization that they were ties with called Evergreen Project, which basically advocated for the use of drugs and electroshock therapy to pray the gay the way, right? So if people were gay, they would basically tell them that, you could be cured, and they would, try to convert them to being straight, which I think is not only psychologically damaging, I think it's completely and utterly unethical. And I just couldn't be a part of that any longer. So I was like, if this is the one true church out of all the 40,000 denominations, they sure the hell ain't going about it right. Somebody's giving them some bad information, because I as a conscious agent that has autonomy and free will and the ability to think and reason, and especially discuss and talk about ethics and think about ethical considerations, I don't find that to be ethical. In fact, I find it to be unethical, and so I couldn't, in good conscience, be affiliated with that any longer. Now, people can argue again that Mormons aren't Christians or whatever, but it really makes no difference. It's religion in itself, right? It's any religion that you have some ethical concerns about, because many of the modern religions out there that I find to be ethically questionable. Now, not all of them. I don't want to paint this brush. I don't want to paint this huge general statement, because I know people that are religious that I think are the most amazing people on the world. I think there's some atheists I know that are the most amazing people in the world. It's not one size fits all. I know some theologians that are complete assholes. I know some Christians are that some of the worst people on the planet. I know some atheists are some of the worst people on the planet. It has nothing to do whether they're a theologian or a theist or an atheist. It's the fact that they're shitty people. And I've come to grips with that. I've come to terms that they're just horrible people. So I can't say, look, all these, young earth creationists, which again, people know that I'm very much against young earth creationism. I believe very strongly that young earth creationism is bullshit. And so I can't say, hey, look, I'm not religious because young earth creationism is bullshit. There's other groups out there that don't accept young earth creationism, right? Like the Reasons to Believe organization that I've worked with Dr. Fuzz Rana and Dr. Hugh Ross. Great people, two of the nicest people I've ever met. And if more Christians were like them, they might actually probably have more people joining the church. But even then, my experience with Dr. Ross and Dr. Rana didn't ever move me to become Christian again, right? Great people, but nothing they informed me wanted me to go, oh, okay, yeah, I started believing again. I've had nothing in my adult life to say I should start believing again. The only thing maybe about 8 years ago, I would say maybe I might tend to theism only because I've had some spiritual experiences that I couldn't identify. I couldn't wrap my head around. And so I would be like, okay, I'm leaning only this way a little bit only because I've had experiences, which I think are really critical in the religious mindset about personal experiences. And how do you process these experiences, whether they are of supernatural origin or just natural origin, and you're not processing them correctly. And I had to think about this very, very cognitively. What did I experience? Did I experience something? Yes, more than once. Was it supernatural? I thought so then, but now maybe not so much. And then I made this conscious decision that I said, look, even if it was a supernatural event that had happened, it doesn't get me to Christianity. Even though it was involved during the Mormon Church and the feeling of the Holy Ghost or whatever they call it, I've never felt like I had a personal relationship to Jesus. Never. And again, I do realize that people say, oh, well, again, Mormons aren't Christians or whatever. And, again, irrelevant. If God has led me to the Mormon church at one time, it was maybe for a reason. And that reason wasn't ever fulfilled because even though I joined the Mormon church, I left. And so it didn't bring me to this kumbaya and this personal relationship with Jesus that a lot of Christians keep talking about. Because I don't know what their personal relationship with Jesus happens to be. I don't know if they have lunch together. I don't know if a lot of them are just kind of mentally unwell. And by the way, I'm not saying Christians are mentally unwell. I do not think that for a second at all. But I do believe very strongly that some people that are mentally unwell do gravitate to religiosity. And so there's a distinct difference there. By the way, I do have a guest to join us, the wonderful Suzanne. Salty?
Hey.
Suzanne the Salty. Trademarker.
Hey.
I saw you pop in there, girl. Hi.
Yeah, hey everybody. Awkward topic you're doing there. It's really one that is so controversial with so many people.
I don't really do much like this. I people have asked me, hey Steve.
I know you don't.
Yeah, people have asked me, hey Steve, why you're agnostic? What is your reasoning? And by the way, I've always told people, look, I have a burden to meet. My own burden of proof is why I'm agnostic, right? And people know I do obviously use philosophical terminology. I think this lack of belief atheism is complete bullshit. I think any atheist who has not seriously looked into why atheism in the negative doesn't make sense or why you shouldn't, is just not really interested in the topic. I think they're just parroting, because any rational human being, because that's why, look, most of the philosophical atheists out there, all of them agree with me on it. I mean, because there's a lot to it. But the point is that all of us are non-believers. You are a non-believer. I'm a non-believer, right? Yeah.
On and off.
Yeah, you vacillated a little bit. I've listened to your channel, and
I've vacillated a lot.
Yeah, and by the way, I find nothing wrong with that. And as agnostic, by the way, you're more than allowed to do that, because it doesn't have to be exactly 50-50. You can go from one side or the other, but and you could change your probability within a certain margin of error. But you've never been out there going, oh yes, I'm Jesus is my savior kind of stuff, and the next day going, Jesus doesn't exist, because that would be an extreme, right?
Yeah, that would be extreme. And the thing is, my faith doesn't really line up with anything much in American Christianity either. So I'm kind of out there on the margins.
And it doesn't have to, though. That's what the beauty of it is. This is why when people say, well, you have to be Christian to be saved, I'm like, what kind of God is that? I mean, that makes no sense to me. I was out to lunch with Dr. Kenny Rhodes when I was doing that show with Reasons to Believe, and I had to go to Fullerton to do a test show. And Dr. Kenny Rhodes was one of the nicest Christians I've ever met. And he took me out, and we talked about this topic. And I just turned my camera for you so you can see me. And I said, well, look, I don't believe in God, but I consider myself a pretty moral person. I don't go out kicking puppies. I don't do any of the Ten Commandments shit for the most part. Most of it at least. Why should I be damned to hell just because I don't believe God exists? And he said, well, I don't think that you are. And he said, look, and he may differ from other people in the organization there. I hope I don't get him in trouble, but he basically has said, look, I do believe that you have to, believe, or Jesus is the only way to salvation, but I believe Jesus is so fair that, after you die, he'd be like, hey, look, I am here. Do you accept me, kind of stuff? And you could be atoned afterwards. Now, not all Christians are like that, but some Christians are like that. And I'm like, well, that's a little bit fair, right? I mean, that's a little bit, at least a little bit more fair.
I can't imagine a God that would condemn people because they didn't pray the right prayer or they weren't the right flavor. So what's out there? And it's kind of funny because the only reason I still believe there is a God at all is because I've had just too many supernatural experiences in my lifetime.
Yeah.
I've seen people who've died, for years and years and years. And that always leads me back. It's like, if there's some kind of weird afterlife, then there must be something more out there. But I don't think it looks anything like what American Christianity is.
And that's exactly my point. I don't think the concept of hell is anything like, what any kind of real place would be. And so, when they're telling you have to believe this, to me, it's argument to the cudgel, argumentum ad baculum. Which it's believe this, or you're going to have to be suffering these ramifications. Which to me, again, no benevolent being should have to argue by fallacies, right? No benevolent being should say, hey, look, believe in me or suffer the consequences, and because it just doesn't make any sense. That's not ethical. And so I'm approaching these types of beliefs again from a virtue ethics point of view, or at least some kind of consequentialism to some degree.
Yeah.
But it has to be, does this make sense to me if God does exist, he gave me the ability to reason, right?
He gave you critical thinking skills.
So why would then he condemn me for using those critical thinking skills appropriately?
Exactly.
Even if I got the wrong answer, even if I came up with the wrong conclusion, if you did it, it logically as far as your steps, but you made a faux pas somewhere, you still could have the wrong conclusion, but at least the attempt was made, right? You're like, okay, you know what? Right. You gave it a good go, but you got the wrong conclusion. I think that's actually even better than getting the right conclusion for the wrong reasons sometimes.
Exactly. And there's a part of the Bible, I wish I could remember where it is. I have to look. It's in Romans, where it actually says, it talks about people who don't have the opportunity to hear the message or salvation or any of that. And it talks about God putting in within everybody right and wrong. And I'm a big believer in that. Everybody knows right from wrong.
I think so.
We set up as a child.
Well, I'm going to disagree. I don't think everybody does. I think everybody with a conscience does.
Right. Anybody with a conscience. Yeah. Unfortunately, there are people out there with zero consciences.
Yeah. And that's a big difference.
What? I'm being paged.
Okay. Well, I'll be here. You can go step away.
I got to pause. Right. I got to pause. My husband's calling.
No worries.
And I don't know what the hell's going on there, but I just got paged.
But yeah, I happen to agree with that. Hang on, she got a lot of stuff going on. But yeah, it would make sense that at a certain point, God would have to say, or even in the condition, what's called a subjunctive case, even in what's it's called a counterfactual case, in the next possible world, if things have been different, would you have believed? I think those things have to be taken into account. I think that's a just God. I mean, to me, it only makes sense, and not eternal damnation. I don't think that makes sense regardless. But for somebody to say, look, I don't want to be with God, that would only make sense if they know God exists, right? If they have perfected knowledge, if they actually have the actual knowledge of God and then they reject God, that's a little bit different than somebody who just says, look, I don't believe that you exist, or I believe that you don't exist, right? An atheist who just says, look, there are no gods, God should say, hey, well, you know what? I am here. Now that you know that I'm here, do you want to accept me or not? And then that changes the whole dynamic, right? And an atheist could then say, well, I think you're a moral monster. I think you're unethical, blah, blah. And, they could have a conversation about it or something like that. And then, if there's some kind of punishment afterwards, which again, I don't know why there would be. I mean, if you honestly believe that this creator being is malanthropic or somehow is diatheistic, that because it seems like the Old Testament God is not really the nicest dude in the world as compared to the New Testament, right?
He sucks. He sucks. I don't like the Old Testament God at all. But I have to look at, I used to have this Bible that had explanations, said who wrote, what time frame, what the civilization was like. And I think you have to look at the Old Testament and say, this was a really harsh civilization, that this is how they looked at the world. So of course they're going to interpret their God through that filter and write the Old Testament.
Right.
I don't take much of the Old Testament seriously as a result, but you have to look at where it came from and who wrote it, and before you can say, hey.
Yeah, no, I think a lot of it is it's obviously influenced by the individual writers. Absolutely. Yeah. And especially because they all thought differently. So you had all these different types of perceptions going on. Same thing we've seen now. That's why you have so many different denominations. By the way, yeah, I know people have been saying that Kenny has been saying a lot of weird stuff lately. I am not familiar with the newer stuff, Godless Scummer. Just FYI, I don't know what's been going on with him lately. I know he's had some issues here and there, but I don't know what the latest kerfluffle is. So I am out of the loop on that, just FYI. So if there is more on that, if there's something going on with Kenny, I will look into that. But I can tell you right now, I just have heard minor stuff, but it's mostly basically being, Kenny has said some stupid shit lately, which he might have, right? Again, I don't know. I'm not privy to that right now because I haven't looked into it, but I'm aware that there's some stuff going on there. So Jamie Russell, who's a theist, says, okay, does it matter to you does it matter that you expect to die? Eternal life is a gift. Well, first of all, I believe we all are self-aware that we're going to die, right? There are certain things in the human condition that we all are aware of. We have to eat, we have to sleep, we have to, procreate if we want to have our descendants. We have needs that we have. These are all things of the human conditions. And so if eternal life is a gift, this is one of the things that always bugged me, and I'm going to ask Suzanne here if you agree with me, because I really hate doing canards, and I hate doing atheist tropes. You know me, I will shit on the atheist community left and right, because I think they use too many idioms and too many, throwaway statements that I think are completely irrational as far as an epistemological point of view. But this one here, I actually kind of do agree with. A gift should not have contingencies with it. A gift should not have strings with it, of any kind. It should be predicated upon anything, acceptance or not, of God. You can't say, look, I have a free gift for you, and all you have to do is do this. That's not a free gift. And now I understand even with a free giveaway, they say, sign up to this and you get a free gift. But again, that's not a free gift to me, because you're having to do something for it.
Yeah, you're having to earn it. You're having to jump through those hoops. I absolutely agree with you on that, believe it or not. And I don't know if life is a gift all the time. I was just going to get ready to throw out, when you're old and this stuff starts happening, what kind of a gift is that?
And especially, and by all stretch of the imaginations, though, and let's be frank here. And by the way, I have a feeling people are going to shit on this freaking stream left and right. And by all means, I do it. I don't care. I really don't. I'm being as forthright as I can, because I get shit on from theists and atheists, and I don't care. But I will tell you that you and I, comparatively speaking to a lot of people, probably have it a lot better than a lot of people, most people out there. There are people that are suffering. There are people that are in constant. I know. And I know that you have issues, medical issues. I have said some things. Everybody has their own burdens and crosses to bear, so to speak.
Everybody, yes.
But there are people out there that have gone through literally hell. As a matter of fact, look, okay, since Easter Sunday, right? Jesus went through this 3 days of torment, got crucified and then rose 3 days later. And yes, you can argue. Some people say, well, in the Garden of Gethsemane, he had all the sins put on him, and he took on the weight of the world. Okay, that's a metaphysical thing. That's a supernatural thing. But as far as like the physicality of what he went through, I am sorry, but that is absolutely nothing comparative to those people that have lived through things like Auschwitz or Dachau, right? To me, it's unconscionable to say that, okay, we're going to give worship to this divine being of God when we know that the people in Auschwitz, I can't speak German. Auschwitz, yeah, and I'm a terrible Jew. Dachau, I could say, or Buchenwald. Buchenwald was the other one. There's like, I don't know, a whole bunch of them, but I remember Buchenwald, Auschwitz, and Dachau. But the Jewish concentration camps, those people literally had suffered probably more than any other people in the entire fucking history of humanity. And most people of us would not even know a single one of their names. Now, I know that atheist pastor does because he puts it on his Twitter. He puts names of the people that died in Auschwitz. And he respects all those people that had passed away. But here we are on Easter celebrating, Jesus is one of the most well-known names in the history of humanity, which, by the way, was a title, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah.
And so...
Let me explain to you a little bit about certain kinds of evangelical.
Please do, because this is your area. This is what I want to do on.
Okay. And I know this for a fact because this was really important where I went to church at. And I'm sorry, my hair's driving me nuts. What they believe about the crucifixion and why they're all up into the crucifixion is they believe that when Jesus was crucified, not back in the Garden of Gethsemane, but when he was crucified, he literally offered.
Uh-oh, she froze.
I'm in Costa Rica.
I know, your signal there is horrible, but go ahead. So in the Garden of Gethsemane, he literally what?
The Garden of Gethsemane, that doesn't matter. That was not what was taught. What was taught was on the cross. Mm-hmm. Every ailment in the world was laid upon him on the cross. So
where did that come from?
I think that came out of Bethel. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Bethel Redding. Look them up. They are a very scary CULT church.
Yeah, no, I'm familiar with the name.
They came up with this healing theology. They're the ones that came up with the idea that on the cross, well, they grabbed it and ran with it. I don't know where it originally originated from, but the idea is that because all this was laid on Jesus on the cross, that we as Christians can go before God the Father and say, by Jesus' stripes, we are healed. And the devil has no right to put this pimple or MS or serious things, slight or serious thing on me. And I declare that I'm healed in the name of Jesus, blah, blah, blah. Long thing they do. And they say that at the point you can't even admit to having symptoms. You have to say, no, I am healed. The symptoms are alive from the pit of hell.
Yeah, that's just brainwashing
to me. It's a newer thing. In the last 20, 30 years, it's gotten huge. It's around the crucifixion.
Yeah, that to me is brainwashing. I hate faith. I really hate faith healers. I really do. I've gone on record. Faith healers are all bullshit. And back in our day, you remember the 80s. You remember the age of Aquarius, and you especially remember when it came to like Benny Hinn. Benny Hinn, and yeah. Well, you had a lot of the answers. You had Jim Baker, who wasn't a faith healer per se.
Did you see the recent movie that came out about him and Tammy Faye?
No, but I remember. Okay, so I remember him and Tammy Faye. And he had an affair with Jessica Hahn, and then he got busted. He got like 45-year sentence for tax issues, and then he served about 8.
He didn't
Yeah.
serve it all.
No, he served. I think he served 8. I remember a little bit. He served like 8 years for a 45-year sentence. His wife, Tammy Faye Baker, died while he was in prison. But Jim Baker was just one of many of them that had fallen from grace, that was doing all these shady shit that they preach against. Jimmy Swaggart.
Jimmy Swaggart, I have personal knowledge of because I went to college in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. I can tell you some crazy Jimmy Swaggart stories. My father went.
Jimmy Swaggart got busted with this prostitute about 2 miles that way. from me.
Yeah, the
Indio,
real
California,
nasty
2 miles. I
five
know the street that he got pulled over
hooker.
on. Yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah.
bet you do. I once told him to go F himself. Back in the 80s, I had the experience of meeting him.
Oh, lucky you. My aunt was
Yeah.
my aunt Wanda. Rest her soul. One of the nicest women, people on the planet. I loved my aunt Wanda to death. She was just a beautiful soul. She was a big fan of Jimmy Swaggart, and after he fell, I really kind of wanted to said, I told you so. But I never did. Right? I'm not an asshole. It's like my cousin Kim. Yeah. She had suffered from cancer, and I think she had lost one of her kidneys, if I'm not mistaken. And she was, again, I'm not an asshole, but she's praising Jesus on Facebook, saying, thank you, Jesus, for recovery, blah blah blah. I'm like, but Jesus gave you cancer in the first place, supposedly. So it's like he allowed these things and then healed you. Which, by the way, wasn't.
They won't admit that.
No, I know.
The devil gives them cancer. The devil gives them cancer.
It doesn't make any sense to me. And I'm not going to take it away.
Either.
I'm not going to take away their hope and the things of that nature. I'm not like that. I'm the kind of guy that says, hey, look, if you want to pray and you're dying, pray with them. But people when ask me why I'm not Christian, these are all the reasons why I hold the positions that I do. And again, it's funny. Even though people know I'm agnostic, and I've said that, look, there's certain goods I don't believe in, certain things I don't believe, or I believe they're false. I've had some idiot on Facebook going, but Steve's a local atheist to Zeus. I'm like, yeah, so what? I've said this how many times? But Steve doesn't like the atheist term. I'm like, I don't give a shit if you call me atheist if that's my actual position. I'm a local atheist to certain gods. Call me that. That's true. I care what's factual. I care what's true much more than the atheist community seems to care about. I care what actually is true.
You are right. And they seem to wear their atheism as some kind of shield and sword, and it's so bizarre.
Oh my God, yes.
That's why I've stayed away from the atheist community, even though, like I said, I've been on this continuum.
But you wrote for the atheist community. You were a writer for Pathos. You were ingrained in this atheist community, and you saw it firsthand.
Yes, community. I got moved to the atheist community because I wasn't a good fit anywhere on Pathos. There should have been a recovery section. I would have fit there better because everything I was doing was geared towards recovery and looking at these dangerous theology and breaking them apart and saying, this is something healthier to do or think. And that's still my focus.
It should be. I think that's great. Yeah, I think that's your forte. That's what you're known
because
for.
Because women get crushed really badly. Men get crushed too. Don't get me wrong. But women bear a lot of the brunt in evangelicalism. I mean, just all the time for everything you could imagine. Be good looking. Don't be too good looking, or you might get raped. Be sweet. Don't be that sweet. It's just like you pull your hair out at some of the contradictions of what's expected. Well, I mean, I'm kind of of the opinion your only expectation that you really fall under is you're alive and breathing.
I mean, even in the Bible, the women should be. Yeah, women should be seen and not heard, kind of stuff, right? Women should not teach or talk in the temple. Now, again,
when your husband without a word, that's a big one. When your husband without a word, just be super submissive the time, smile.
And what's funny is I would want a woman like that. I couldn't handle a woman submissive like that. It just would drive me nuts.
I tried to be like that, and my husband hated it.
Oh yeah, I would too. Oh God, would I hate it? I'd be like, I was like, oh my God, stop. It's not for me, any stretch of the imagination. But again, these are things that are supposed to be emulating the patriarchal system between the God the Father through Jesus, through the Holy Ghost, and then to the Father, the man of the house, and to the women, right? And so it's just top down type of structure.
Have you seen the structure they do with ATI BLP? They actually have a graphic they do. It's umbrellas.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've seen that graphic. Yep.
God, the husband, then the wife with the children underneath.
Yeah, they're way down there somewhere low.
And they together with the children, like you're a child.
Yeah, and here's the thing. I mean, Jesus was a man, right? I mean, so it's just like right there, you have God who's speaking as the Father in the masculine sense, and again. If he's divinely simple and all those other things, why does he refer to in a male sense? That's one thing I never figured out. Even though we're going to have a show on pronouns coming up in a couple days, but in about a week.
He came out with women. He treated women as equals in his ministry. He was like the first feminist, as far as I'm concerned. Jesus is. And when he rose to the dead, he appeared to the women first instead of the men.
Yeah, no, I
that.
get that, but they kind of ignored that part, right? They're like,
Of course, they ignore that part
right.
because they want to push you down. And you got to understand that a lot of evangelicalism, a lot of the most hardcore male believers, are some of the most milquetoast beta guys I've ever laid eyes on in my life.
Well, they get the congregations though, right? These are the people that know how to bullshit. I mean, I hate to bring it up, but look at somebody like Kyle, right? Kyle knew how to beguile people. Kyle knew how to bullshit people. He would have made a great Christian preacher. And he was, a religious at one time. And he carried over to his atheism, this evangelical approach. This is why a lot of the atheists that have a lot of ego, a lot of these narcissist people out there that have so much self, ego to them, they know how to project themselves and get this following, and whether they're preaching that God is the Father, or they're preaching that Jesus, or they're preaching there is no God. It is all the same type of method. It's just, what do you want them to believe? Same thing, same methods. Absolutely. From them.
Just look at a lady that you and I have struggled with without a box of Kleenex. She has a certain amount of that.
She's known as trash bag now. I just can't stop the call trash bag. This is hilarious.
I prefer to call her this Kleenex. Without a box of Kleenex because of the weird sneezing into her hands and wiping her. Anyway.
Oh my God. I've never seen anybody with so, look, I'm pretty manicured. My hands are clean. I don't. She's in Nas, like, and it's. There's actually a condition for it. I don't remember the name of the medical condition. That, again, I'm not trying to diagnose.
Is, and I don't remember what it is either, because I've struggled with that with not biting my nails. I
haven't bit my nails since decades, but I used to be a nail biter when I was in high school. I used to be a nail biter.
It has to do with the nerves, and people will they'll pick at themselves. They'll chew the skin. Yeah. That's clearly what's going on.
I mean, I gesticulate. I'm a gesticulator, but that's just how I talk.
I am too. So I'm trying not to do it on YouTube too much. But
that's how rumors get started. Look, Suzanne and Steve are gesticulating together on stream. Don't sue me, okay? I'm not harassing you.
I've heard all the rumors about myself. So,
well, if there's any rumors, okay, look, if there's any, look, I'll tell you right now, if there's any rumors between you and I started them, okay? Just FYI.
Oh, rumors don't bother me. Anyway, so yeah, that's how it is with a lot of these religious cults. And you mentioned Jim Baker. Mm-hmm. Are you aware that Jim Baker's back on the scam again?
Yes. Oh, yes.
That he's doing.
He's not. Remember he had his bucket of food thing.
He still has that.
Oh my God, he still does the bucket of food.
Oh my God, my girlfriend. I have a close friend who I adore. Her and I used to go to church together. She's still going to a type of church like that. I am not. I'm not. And I love her dearly. And she still believes some of those things, but she's sweet enough to give me the freedom to believe where I need to believe. She has thousands of dollars worth of those food buckets lined in her hallway. And I was at her house one day visiting. I was like, Joni, because she's telling me how she's saving them for Armageddon, the end of the world.
Why would you need them for Armageddon? It's like, it's supposed to, Jesus is supposed to take care of you. He's supposed to come back.
Well, I looked at her and said, what are you going to use for water? And when I said,
because you got to hydrate it, right? Yeah.
They're all dehydrated. Right. And it's like, what are you going to use for water? And I had just punctured a hole in her whole theology of Armageddon. She really loves eschatology and has talked my ear off through the years. And I'm kind of like, why are you wasting your time on this?
It's funny you mentioned that because years ago, I used to be a customer service manager for Circuit City. And yeah, 3 years I did Circuit City. And one of the customers we used to have that came in was a guy named, he wrote the book, The Late Great Planet Earth. Hal Lindsey. And his wife, it's funny because I went to go work at Staples for a little while at some point too, and his wife would come in to Staples, and I remember this very specifically because she had one of those black American Express, American Express black card, and this is not. I mean, I remember because I remember the name on there, right? And but anyways, they were locals to the area, but I remember when I started looking into a little bit about Hal Lindsey, some books and some reading and stuff like that, I was like, this is all bullshit. I was like, I don't believe in any of this. I think this is all nonsense. And how many times did he rewrite this stuff, and how many times did they say that? Because I remember in the 80s growing up, oh, this is going to happen. It's going to be the end of the world. I've survived so many goddamn ends of the worlds.
End of the world. Yes, yes, yes. I mean, 2012, they said, because the Aztecs ran out of room on their calendar, was going to be the same here. So many of them, so many Christian I'm lost the word. There are a lot of people that come up with this and say this date is the end of the world as we know it.
Jesus is coming back tomorrow. Never happened.
Yeah, I got to experience the Y2K madness in church.
Oh, really? I remember the madness, but I was like, this is, I said nothing's going to happen.
Buy into it. I was kind of like, I know enough about computers to know that what they're saying is going to happen is BS.
But this is all one of the reasons why I'm not a Christian. Is I've seen all these things. I've lived all these things. As I've gotten older, yeah. I'm less and less likely, probabilistic speaking, to believe something along these lines. Now, again, there are reasons why I'm agnostic, only because, again, I've told people I've experienced certain things I still have not fully processed. But I mean, as far as what the reality is, there's only so many certain things that could possibly be. So if there's a being out there that exists that has somehow beyond our scope, I'm going to call that a god. I don't think it's a Christian god, but it's some being. Yeah, even simulation theory, I'm going to throw in a god. I'm going to throw something that's more than what we have. Then I'm agnostic for that. I don't have enough information to really make a conclusion right now on that. But as far as what I can conclude things on based upon reason, then sure, hell doesn't exist the way this person on Twitter was describing it, because there's like, oh, well, if you don't believe in it, you're going there. Fuck, how is that ethical? You know? Who's the other person I was thinking of? There's another name. Do you remember the wonderful Mr. Fred Phelps from the Westboro Baptist Church? He had the following that he had. Remember? The falling out with the church? He was, are you? She's frozen. No wonder she's been quiet. She's froze on me. You guys can't see her, but she's in the phone call with me. But by the way, if you guys want to come in, the link is in the video description. I'm not sorry, it's not in the video description. It's in the live chat. Also, if you want to call on your phone, the pin and the phone number's there. By all means, like if Jeff, you want to call in. But so, anyways, yeah. Fred Phelps, if you guys remember, he was the patriarch of the Westboro Baptist Church, right? And he was just like seriously notorious for going around and picketing these gay funerals. And he is one of the most vile, morally reprehensible, despicable, evil people on the planet. And he's in a set of people that I know a lot of people that fit in that set. There are some very, very, very morally despicable people out there that I've had to deal with in my life. I never met the guy. I never met him personally, but I put him in that same category. And then he had been arrested for like assault and battery. The UK had banned him. It got so bad he couldn't even go to the UK because he was just spewing vile. And they basically said he was so bad they kicked him out of his own organization. Yeah. So, a lot of these people, these religious people, all these nutters, many of them have, these propensities themselves when they're anti-gay, gay marriage. They come and find out, they're gay. I mean, look at what that one guy, wasn't Jimmy Swaggart. It was, what was his name? I'm drawing a blank here. Who was the one that was snorting the cocaine off the hooker's ass? I remember the incidents, but I can't remember their names. I'm so bad at names. One of you guys will have to remind me. Who was the preacher that was snorting the cocaine off the hooker's ass? Was that Ted Haggard? I think it was Ted Haggard, wasn't it? He had that male escort dude, right? And it wasn't cocaine, it was crystal meth. That's what it was. Yeah. He was crystal meth or something like that. Yeah, Ted Haggard. Yeah. I mean, but these are the people that are out there preaching this stuff, right? And again, I'm not using the argument because this would be a fallacious argument. Christianity is wrong because, these people were, not living the life that they claimed to be living. They were hypocrites. You can't use that argument. That is a bad argument. Because there's just so many bad atheists out there, and if atheism is true, it doesn't make a difference, right? Yeah, it was smoking meth off, with a male prostitute, yeah. So, I mean, yeah. We'll see if Suzanne comes back. But all these things, in my life, I've seen a lot of this, though. I've seen a lot of people that have been self-professed Christians, and they don't even act it the way themselves. And I have to think to myself, look, if I knew God exists, and I'm not talking about just a mere belief, I'm talking about knowledge, where it's the three conditions, the tripartite conditions for justified true belief. The proposition is true, you believe the proposition is true, and you're justified. So I meet all those conditions, and I know. I don't even say certainty. Just say you even have certainty. Certainty is not a condition of knowledge. You can have knowledge without having certitude or certainty. Certitude is the inability to doubt, right? And certainty is that you're absolutely convinced. So there is a little bit of difference there. So when I say I have certainty of something, it's just I'm 100% convinced. It doesn't mean I can't be wrong. Certitude means that you just not rationally should be able to doubt something. Like I have certitude that A equals A. I cannot doubt that. There's nothing in my brain that allows me to doubt that equality, right? And so I am certain that there's an equality there, and it's indubitable to me. So I have certitude. And so, if let's say that I had certitude, that I had perfect knowledge, like Satan would know that God exists, right? The angels know that God exists. If I had that kind of knowledge, right, that these people claim to possess, I would be doing everything in my fucking power not to be doing what they do, right? I mean, the hypocrisy, it wouldn't even be hypocrisy, it'd be just straight up stupid. If you know God exists and you're saying, hey, look, I'm going to do these things anyways, that doesn't make much sense. If your goal is to be, quote, saved, if that's the truth, right? So I think a lot of them are just complete hypocrites. I think most of these preachers are complete hypocrites. Yeah, as somebody said, do as I say, not as I do. Now, again, I want to make it very clear. I'm not making the argument that Christianity is wrong because there's hypocrisy, because there's hypocrisy in the atheist community as well. But it sure lends to the argument that, if these people really claim to have the knowledge that they claim to have, because it's easier. So if God does exist, right, it is therefore, to me, easier for a Christian to have information about that than if God does not exist. Because, again, it's very difficult to try to prove an existential negative. I'm not saying it can't be done. You can prove a negative. It's called proof by impossibility. But it is a lot more difficult, I think. But if God exists, he can reveal himself in many different ways. He can tell somebody that he exists. He can take them to the heavens. He can take Enoch and whoever up and show him the world, and, take Jesus wherever he wants to go, or whatever he wants to do, because he's God, right? So when a Christian says, yes, I know God exists, that's a hell of a claim. That is like an extremely strong claim. Do I think any theist can make that burden? No. Do I think they can make the burden and proof that they believe? Yes. If somebody says God exists and I believe it, I think they can make the burden and proof easily. A theist can, or an atheist can make their burden and proof that God does not exist. That's fine. These are dosastic burdens here, right? When you say there's no God or there is a God, that's a much higher burden to meet, right? And so I'm not convinced that anybody can meet that burden, okay, as far as like claiming knowledge. In fact, a skeptic will tell you that we don't have any kind of knowledge, right? An academic skeptic says knowledge doesn't exist. So to them, it's prima facie that these people are claiming things that they cannot possibly claim to justify, because they claim that there is no such thing as knowledge. So I try to avoid any kind of knowledge claims when it comes to those kinds of metaphysical things. And I think that most atheists probably do avoid saying, look, I know there's no such thing as supernatural, because it'd be hard to justify that. I haven't met anybody that's actually successfully, I think, justify that I'd go, okay, that makes sense. By the way, just because they justify doesn't mean you have to agree, right? I mean, again, both theist and atheist can justify their positions that God exists or God does not exist. That doesn't mean you have to accept either one. It just means, okay, I accept that according to your argument, you are rationally entitled to hold that belief, right? That's all it is. That's all your meeting your burden and proof is. So when an atheist says, look, God doesn't exist, and I claim that, and somebody says, well, you have to prove that. No, you don't. Okay. But the atheist can just say, look, the reason why I'm holding that position that there are no gods is I'm making a probabilistic argument based upon the things that I've learned about, the nature of the claims. I would hold that because of the logical problem of evil, the evidential problem of evil, the problem of divine hiddenness, the appeal to naturalism, the appeal to theological virtues, all these different things that I've read about. By the way, I'm not speaking for me. I'm speaking as a hypothetical atheist. I would hold that it has lowered the probability of God existing to the point to be sufficient to warrant justification to believe there are no gods. That's it. That's how an atheist can claim there's no gods, and be perfectly reasonable to do it. Because I can look at them and say, okay, I think you met your burden of proof that you are rationally justified to hold the position there are no gods. That's it. Now, have they proven there's no gods? No, but they're not required to. That's not their claim. If you say to an atheist, you have to prove there are no gods, you're strawmanning that atheist if they're not making that claim. Just like when a theist says there are gods and you say, hey, prove it, you're strawmanning the theist. You can't have it singular way. It works both ways. It's bidirectional there. If you have an atheist and you have a theist, or they're the flip sides of the same coin, and you tell an atheist you've got to prove there are no gods, and the atheist goes, no, I don't. The same thing with the theist. You have to prove there's a God. The theist goes, no, I don't. They only have to make that proof is if they say, hey, look, I can prove there's a God. Then they have a little more of an onus, right? Then you can say, okay, well, go ahead and prove it. Let me look at your proof. And if they don't provide it, of course, nothing's going to happen. You just go, okay, well, I know you're bullshitting, right? You're not under some kind of metaphysical judgment if you make a claim and you're wrong on it. So, and Estrada says, Bart Ehrman had a good talk on the development of Judaism with no afterlife at all to the idea of divine justice, punishment for the wicked, and paradise for the righteous. Yeah, and that's about annihilationism and things of that nature. A lot of the Jews actually believe that there's nothing afterwards and no afterlife. But again, that still doesn't make much sense to me. Why would you go through all the motion of all these learning these things for your entire lifespan just to have it negated because there's nothing afterwards? That, again, makes no sense. But at the same token, if there is a heaven, right, Anasfrida, then what is it going to be like for the people that only had lived for like a day? Let's say that it's stillborn. And I know these have been old questions. These are not novel arguments by any stretch of imaginations, but there's things I do think about. If there's a child that's only a few seconds old and they die, and assume that this baptism bullshit is not the case, right? Because I don't think infant baptism makes sense to me. I think it's weird. But let's say that a baby is saved. What is that knowledge that baby's going to have when they're in heaven? And again, people can all kind of theorize, and that's all it is, though. These are all hypothetical situations that people can theorize because they have no inside knowledge on that. They have no idea what it's going to be like in heaven for a newborn as compared to somebody who's lived, 60, 70, 80, 100 years. They have no idea. They're guessing. I'm sorry, it's a straight up guess. So, Jeff says, hence, I say I believe there are no gods, and not that I know there are no gods, which I think is perfectly reasonable, Jeff. Unfortunately, a lot of these Twitter atheists treat the word belief as a dirty word, and they're idiots. I get them all the time. Look, Jeff, I had a guy on Twitter. People know that I go on these Twitter, Facebook groups, and people have started to realize I wasn't bullshitting. When I say these are dumb people, these are fucking dumb people. I'm not even being hyperbolic. These are some of the dumbest people I've ever ran across in my entire life in these Facebook groups. They're just flat out stupid. They're as bad as any young creationists that are the bottom of the barrel ones. They're just as bad as any flat earther. They're dumb. And so I've had people tell me, I don't have any beliefs. I'm like, okay, so A equals A. You don't believe that? Well, no, I know it's true. Well, then if you know it, you believe it because knowledge is a subset of belief, and they don't understand that. But I'm like, okay, let's assume that you don't grasp that knowledge of this subset of belief, right? And if you guys remember back in the day on the Non Sequitur show, this was kind of an issue because Godless Engineer's wife, Caitlin Chloe, who knows nothing about epistemology, was trying to argue with me that knowledge is not a subset of belief. And when I asked her for any evidence, all hell broke loose, right? I got shat upon by the atheist side over there because I dared ask her for evidence that knowledge is not a subset of belief, as a common understanding of knowledge. Now, we could get into pragmatic theories, but she wouldn't know anything about the difference between a pragmatic theory of knowledge as opposed to justified true belief, right? So common understanding of knowledge is that it requires belief. So it's a subset of belief. And so putting that to the side on the Facebook group that they didn't know this. And I was like, okay, so if I asked you, do you believe A equals A? The only two direct answers to that are yes and no, or no. Of course, you can have, I don't know. Sure. I mean, sure. But I don't know is ordinary doubt. I don't know is not expressing you don't have epistemological knowledge. I don't know it means that you are unable to answer the question. So people have to be very careful of equivocation when they say, I don't know. You're not having anything to do with epistemological knowledge. You're just expressing ordinary doubt. But when I ask somebody, A equals A, do you believe that? The only three really answers they can give, and only two of them are direct answers, are yes, I believe that. No, I do not believe that. Or I don't. Well, even still, I don't know is weird. I mean, how would they not know if they believe it or not? You either believe it or you don't. Right? If you can't say yes, the answer is no. It's binary. Beliefs, even though beliefs are not dichotomous, beliefs are not binary. You either believe or you don't believe. But you can believe true or you can believe false, meaning there's not a dichotomy there. But if you can't say yes, the only other option is no. Right? And so if I ask somebody, do you believe A equals A? And they're like, oh, I don't have beliefs. I'm like, okay, so you don't believe A equals A. And they're like, I didn't say that. I'm like, yes, you have. You're putting words in my mouth. No, I'm not. If you say you have no beliefs and I ask you, do you believe A equals A? And you say, no, you don't believe that, or you obfuscate. Most of the time they obfuscate. They won't actually come out and say that because they look like stupid. Or they'll say, no, I don't believe it. I know it. That's stupid. But I'm like, okay, so you don't believe that. And they're like, you're straw manning me. You're putting words in my mouth. I swear to God, this happens all the freaking time, dude. All the freaking time I have these discussions. And just, they don't think themselves how dumb they look. Because again, just using simple logic and reasoning, they either believe or they don't believe. And it applies more than just with a God. It has to do with any kind of propositions. So when I say, so you don't believe A equals A? And they start doing this weird song and dance. And I see this happen all the freaking time. Floyd says, I'm not stupid. I have the belief that I have no beliefs. Yeah. That's not looks like a liar paradox, right? Yeah, I believe that I have no beliefs. But yeah. Let's see here. Jeff says, when myself and Jen were trying to say to one of the people that we shouldn't be afraid of the word belief, that's when we were labeled undercover Christian apologists. I got this the other day, dude. Literally the other day, they were like, this person was like, you're a theist because you're advocating for beliefs. I've had that happen just the other day, and I'm like, dude, no, I'm not. Here, the word belief has many different usages, polysemous, just like many other words, right? And yes, in the religious sense, it's from pistos, and that basically means a faith as far as you can rely on somebody. So faith in God means that you can trust God. It doesn't necessarily mean you just have faith that like a fiatist does. A fiatist will say God exists, but I'm not justified to believe it, but I do so anyways. It's not that kind of faith. The pistos for the word faith in the way the Christians have described it, as I understand it from them, talking to many of them, is that it's you trust in God, that God is going to be, righteous and all that other stuff. You have faith in God. Not that he exists, more that it's more of a trust thing. But then in epistemology, though, in philosophy, belief means that you hold a proposition to be true. That's it. If my proposition is the cat is on the mat, if I hold that proposition to be true, that propositional content, I think, is veridical with reality. If there's a truth maker exists, that is the cat is on the mat, that makes that proposition true, then I say I believe the proposition. That's it. It has nothing to do with the other type of belief in religion. And it's the atheists that try to have that weird equivocation there, and I don't know why. It makes them look dumb. April says there's a difference between evidence-based beliefs and faith-based beliefs to some degree. But you have to remember this, April. Faith-based beliefs are not bad either. We all have faith-based beliefs, not just religious people. In order for you to function in reality, you have to have what's called faith-based commitments. Now, there are variations of this. Wittgenstein called them hinged commitments. In foundational classical foundationalism, that's called properly basic beliefs. But the principles behind them is very, very, very similar in that a faith-based commitment is something that we cannot rationally justify to hold, but we have to in order to survive. We have to be able to do so to function. They're universal. We all have to make certain assumptions and presuppositions in life, such as there's an external world, right? If you and I did not believe there's an external world, we wouldn't be sitting here having this conversation right now. Or if the external minds exist. If we didn't believe that, we wouldn't be talking to each other. Those are faith-based commitments. And the reason why they're faith-based is because they're not able to be justified rationally. Because any attempt to do so will, one, either be circular, or any evidence for one belief is evidence for the contrary. That's nothing that makes a deciding factor. Either, if any evidence that reality is external can be used also to try to argue that reality is internalized. So we have to make a philosophical determination for ourselves what we think is how we want our philosophical framework to be. I accept that reality is external to the mind. I believe that there's what's called ontological persistence. If I leave the room, things are still there. But somebody else might say, look, no, when I leave the room, there's nothing else. It's all about me. No other external minds exist. I'm a solipsist. And by the way, there can only be one true solipsist. April. Yeah, they are different. Yeah, no, I agree with you. Yeah, I definitely agree with you there. Kiwamaki, there's dispensational beliefs as opposed to on-current belief, right? An on-current belief is what you're believing at time. And dispensational beliefs are something that, just kind of crosses your mind here and there, right? Our brains cannot process all these beliefs at one time, right? So we don't have all these massive amount of on-curring beliefs. Most of the processing has already been done, and we just kind of recognize something and we just go on, and so a dispensational belief would be something like I see somebody running, right? So, is the dog run? The dog, the dog is running. It's true. Why the dog is running, right? So I have a dispositional belief that at the time I'm seeing something happen. So as I'm living, I have a lot of these dispositional beliefs that is becoming uncurrent as it's happening. But as far as like things that I've thought about a long time ago, they're not active. They're not in the forefront of my mind. But I still hold those propositions to be true or false, or suspend judgment on them. But we have a special guest that gets a moderation. I'm gonna give him moderator because not that he's ever gonna use it, but I just want him to feel special because he is special. We have Landon Kurt Knoll. He says axiomatic systems that permit often logically collapse onto themselves, rendering such logical structures effectively useless. Yes and no, Landon. And okay, so this is where Landon and I get into this kind of stuff. So in classical logic, obviously you cannot have A does not equal A. The reason being is that it has what's called the principle of explosion. If you allow A to not equal A in classical logic, you can prove anything. You can literally prove anything. That's the principle of explosion. It explodes. I can prove 1 + 1 = 5. I can prove anything. I can prove that dogs equals cats. I can prove anything I want if I allow contradiction in classical logic. However, there are other types of logic, and by the way, Landon knows all this stuff. I'm not telling him anything new. This is for the other people out there. But there are paraconsistent logics, which are a type of diatheistic logic. And a diatheistic logic is basically a logic that has true contradictions. And a paraconsistent logic is a type of logic that doesn't have the principle of explosion. So it allows for there to be a true contradiction without the ability to prove everything. And a diatheistic state is a very, very unique type state, but is allowed in non-classical logics, right? So again, people can discuss multiple different types of logics, and unfortunately, some people think it's all the same. Because I remember I was having a discussion with somebody on Twitter, and we were talking about multi-valued logics. And in multi-valued logics, you can have true, false, or U. U stands for unknown. Okay? So that's an actual value of the proposition. And people know in regular propositional logic, you can have either true or false. So a proposition is true or it's false. There's no middle ground, right? This logic's through the middle. You can believe it's true. You can believe it's false. You can believe neither, or you can be irrational and believe both. 4 options. Only 3 are rational. But as far as the ontological states, it's either true or false. And so in multi-valued logics or multi-varied logic, there's either one, you can have unknown. And so I was trying to explain this concept to somebody on Twitter, and all of a sudden Matt Dillahunty chimes in, and he had one word that he tweeted to me. This was a long time ago, by the way. That word was wrong. And I'm like, hey, look, I don't mind somebody telling me I'm wrong. Okay, I'm not an expert in these topics. I'm sufficiently read enough to have a basic understanding, I think. Landon has proofread my work. He has read my Gumballs and God essay, gave it a thumbs up. He has read my atheist semantic collapse argument that I want to have published. He has given it a thumbs up. I have multiple PhDs I've read that argument. Not one of them has found a logical error yet. And the Gumballs of God, I think, is one of my better essays. He didn't find any problem with it. Josh Gardner, who's a mathematician, didn't find any problem with it. Josh Rasmussen has read my work, and he wrote a really hard to read book, but it's very in depth on necessary existence with Alexander Press. So these guys know what they're doing. These guys are hell of a logicians. And so, I think that my stuff's decent enough to at least say that, yes, I have a basic understanding, right? I mean, it's all completely undergrad shit. Matter of fact, Nanda and I have a Venn diagram that we have named after us that we named the McCrae-Knoll Venn diagram, because he helped me with the legend to make it very succinct, very concise, and I think it was perfect what I was trying to describe. And long story short, sure, if you think I'm wrong, show me. That's all I ask. Show me. If I make a logical faux pas, show me. Landon knows if I have a logical argument and he looks at the math and he says, dude, this math's wrong, dude. I'm going to fix it. It happened with him. It wasn't a math error. He just had something wrong on the math board, right? It was just a mistake. And I'm like, hey, Landon, I think you mean this. He's like, oh, yeah. We all do this. Happens to me frequently. Hey, Steve, I think you mean this. Yes. Yeah. And I fix it, right? Because mistake. But when Matt Dillahunty says wrong, and I ask him, okay, what am I wrong about, Matt? He's like, you're the believer you don't believe. This is all on Twitter. It's still out there. And I'm like, I'm trying to remember the best I can. I remember he said wrong, but I think he said, yeah, you either believe or you don't believe. And I'm like, yeah, so what? What the fuck does that got to do with anything, Matt? And he was just going after me. And I'm like, Matt, I'm not talking about classical logic here. I'm talking about three value logic, which is multi-value logic, in that you don't have to have true or false. And even then, it has nothing to do with whether you just believe or don't believe. That still holds true. Even in multi-valued logics, you still either believe or you don't believe. And so I don't know what the hell he thought he was arguing about with me. It was very surreal. Hang on a sec. I mean, mic issues left and right. But hang on, damn it. The better. Oh, you know what? Let me take that. Yeah, that helped. All right. Let's see here. Okay, so anyways, going back on the topic here about why I'm not Christian. Again, I'm not trying to say like because there's been shitty Christians out there, I'm not Christian. I'm trying to take it as a holistic approach, right? And so when I do talk to these Christian people, none of them are giving me any like reasons to really change my mind, right? I've been there, done through all this stuff, right? And so I'm thinking if God exists, he's going to have to come up a little bit more to convince me. And so on the Non Sequitur Show channel, I had recorded about 90 seconds, about a minute and a half of a thing that I did for them because they had asked me, hey, Steve, will you give me your best argument for atheism? And I was like, okay, well, you know, and they said keep it under a minute or two, right? Okay. So I'm like, okay, I think one of the best, maybe doesn't have to necessarily be the best. One of the best is divine hiddenness. And I gave it my perspective. And it's to summarize, being a non-resistant non-believer like myself, that means I'm not actively saying, hey, God, go screw yourself, right? If you exist, just let me know. Have a conversation with me, you know? Why would I not want to know? You gave me the ability to reason. You gave me the ability to want to learn. I'm always thinking about things. I read things freaking constantly about many different subjects. I kind of have to nowadays. It's kind of, you know, being on YouTube, especially with the Non Sequitur Show and my own channel, I deal with a lot of different topics. I've talked about physics, biology, you know, philosophy, epistemology, mathematics, reactor physics. I mean, just all these different subjects that I have to go learn a little bit about the basics about. So I have some understanding when I talk about these things. And so I want to learn. I have an inquisitive mind, you know, like yesterday, I'm reviewing stuff on black holes. I've read stuff on black holes since I was like a kid, you know, seriously, I'm not even fronting in you guys can believe me or not. And I don't care. At this point, I have nothing fucking to prove, but I will tell you that in 7th and 8th grade, I was a kid checking out books on fundamental particle physics. Didn't understand the math, right? But I understood the gist of it. You know, I mean, at least I got I knew what a bubble chamber was, you know, I knew what a cloud chamber was. I knew what an ionization path was. I knew what a nucleus was. I knew that the protons and neutrons were comprised of quarks. I knew all that in junior high school. In high school, you know, I would love black holes. You know, I knew what a Kerr-Newman black hole. I knew what a singularity was. I knew what a Minkowski diagram was in high school. And by the way, if you don't believe me, go ask my old roommate who I went to high school with, right? They'll tell you this was a topic that I had an interest in high school. In fact, even on the reasons to believe, it said, you know, Steve growing up wanted to be an astrophysicist, but then Steve realized math is hard, and I didn't want to be an astrophysicist any longer. So that is true. That is actually a true statement. But Floyd says, but non-classical logic violates laws of classical logic that is logically impossible, classically speaking. Well, you know, it's funny. It's classical logic obviously doesn't allow for things called truth gluts and truth gaps. Other logics do. A truth gap is basically something between the gap of true and false, right? That's why they call it truth gap. So it allows for something other than true and false, which is against the law of excluded middle. And then it's called the truth glut, which is that law of non-contradiction. And so it violates the law of non-contradiction. The only one I think that is paramount is the law of identity. I don't see any way you can get around the law of identity in any type of logic. I think that has to be fundamental in any type of logic. I don't know any logic that doesn't have law of identity. What would that even mean? I just, right? But many of the logics don't have to have law of excluded middle or not of non-contradiction. So, but anyway, so go back on the topic as far as like why I'm not a Christian. I just think that God is, as for me, as a divine, a non-resistant non-believer in the divine hiddenness argument, is going to have a better way to approach me, because the people he's been sending me, for the most part, not convincing. Not is more than that. I think they're just bad people. A lot of, well, I shouldn't say that. There's a lot of great Christians in my life. A lot of great Christians. Look, I'm a huge fan of, like Sygart. I think he's one of the nicest guys I've ever met. Dr. Fuzz Rana, Dr. Hugh Ross. There's a lot of great Christians out there. Seriously. But on these Facebook groups, right, they're trying to convince me God exists like that. I'm like, you're just an idiot. And the same thing with the atheist community. And so to me, if God does want me to believe and wants to have a relationship with me, it shouldn't be that hard. It should be pretty easy. But it's not happening. And knowing that I have never had an experience with Jesus, knowing that I've never had any connection with Jesus, I've never met Jesus, I've never talked to Jesus, I never had a personal relationship with Jesus, even when I was a Christian, nothing in my life felt like Jesus. Nothing. I never sat there and had a cross. I never, we prayed, but most of the time you pray to the Father in the name of Jesus, right? But I don't remember praying to Jesus directly. But I never felt that personal connection. So when it comes to Christianity, if God exists and Christ is the risen Son of God or God himself, still confused on that one, I've never made that connection. I never felt that connection. So that's why I believe that God, I believe that Christ existed. I believe there was a man named Christ. I believe there was, well, he wasn't his name is title, but there was a Hebrew rabbi. I think that was I'm not a mythicist, but do I think he had divine attributes? No. I believe that he didn't. I'm probably gonna say the way most Christians describe Christ, I believe that particular version doesn't exist. So as of right now, I will say that probably more likely it is the case that Christ isn't divine. So but there might be versions out there that I'm still agnostic to. This is why, again, the Gnosticism is a very, very interesting position because it's saying, look, I'm not going to make a conclusive statement overall about something. And that's fine. You don't have to, right? It's just be open-minded, except for when it comes to an extreme. Let me give you an example real quick. You guys are going to love this, right? Let me read this real quick, then I'll tell you my example. Landis says, when I involve myself in the scientific method, I try to focus on the knowledge and substance of belief. This is because, and Feynman told me, name dropping, because he worked with Richard Feynman. We have an amazing ability to deceive ourselves. And that's true. No, I got you. I get that. Because, we can have our beliefs. Look, scientists can have a belief because they want to show that something is the case. But then they have to demonstrate it and make it that knowledge, right? They have to show that belief is more than just belief. They have to show it's knowledge because it's justified, they believe it, and it's true. And in mathematics, that's a lot easier than a lot of the ontological things. In mathematics, if you believe something to be true, like the Riemann hypothesis, I believe it's true. Can I prove it? No, but somebody might be able to do it, right? They prove the, Fermat's last theorem or something, or whatever now, not everything is provable. We know by Gödel's incompleteness theorem, one of them, that not everything is provable. We know that for any Turing complete logical system, not all proofs are provable. But there are certain things that we believe that probably are true, or at least I do. But again, leave it to somebody else to do the proof, to make it knowledge, right? Because nobody on the planet is justified to say they know the Riemann hypothesis is true, right? Nobody does. So until it's proven, you cannot claim that you know it's true. You can say you believe it. And I think mathematicians are perfectly fine to say, yeah, I believe it. Well, why do you believe it? Well, because this, and this. Okay, you're justified to believe it. You've rationally made your claim. That is the case. So when you say, yes, the Riemann hypothesis is true, and they ask you, well, why? And you're a mathematician and you explain why, you're justified. Do you have to prove it? No, because you're not claiming knowledge. When you claim knowledge, now you're in a whole different ballgame because now you're like, okay, now you have to prove that is true. Good luck with that. And of course, if you did, you'd be very well known. Floyd says, the reason you do accept Christ is simple. You're totally depraved and God hasn't regenerated you all with his irresistible grace, right? Calvinism has all the answers, right? Yeah, tulip, bud. Oh, by the way, hey, Floyd, I was talking to Matt Slick not too long ago, and Matt Slick is probably going to come on. We just haven't got a date yet. You would be the perfect person to come on if you want to talk to Matt Slick again. It's been a while since you've talked to Matt, I'm sure. Slick, not Matt Dillahunty, but Matt Slick. But yeah, Calvinism, it's another reason why I just not a fan of Christianity. Calvinism to me is batshit. I'm sorry, but Calvinism, these people are I have never met a Calvin that I've really got along with. I think they're all very, very depraved people. At least the ones I met. I really hate to be that judgmental but I met a lot of Calvins, and a lot of them are just very, very judgmental, shitty people. I mean, Matt and Slick I get along with, but he has some pretty fucked up views. Let's be honest here. But oh yeah, so going back to my story, I was going to tell you guys a story. So on Facebook, right? And by the way, the call center is open here, guys. If you want to, Floyd, if you want to come in, the link is in the video description above. Suzanne, I guess connection went to shit. But if you want to call in, there's the number there. Come on in, join me. Again, I do these things freeform anyways, but you know, they are open lines. If somebody theist wants to convince me or an atheist wants to talk, knock yourself out. But come on in. Yeah, no, I agree with you, Floyd. It is logically contradictory. And you remember years ago, this is blast from the past. Do you remember when I was talking to Matt Slick and I think it was his sidekick? It was Bible thumping Wingnut, I think. Matt Slick and that other idiot that we had roasted on the Non Sequitur show. I don't even remember his name because it was such a piece of shit. But anyways, it doesn't matter. But do you remember when I was trying to explain to him that his argument, P or not P, what was it? What was he trying to argue? It was P or not P, but it was just like I remember what he was trying to do. He was basically trying to say P or Q, not Q, therefore not P. He was trying to treat it as a disjunctive syllogism. And I kept trying to explain to him, no, you can't do this. And it was, Scott Clifton and Dr. Alex Mappas had already explained to him ad nauseum why his logic was flawed. And so I was trying to explain to him the same thing. And he's just like not having any of it. And I'm like, dude, you're supposed to be a well-educated individual. And this is basic logic here. You cannot say P equals Q, Q equals not P. Therefore, you know, Q, no, it was maybe you guys remember exactly what it was, but it was just so bizarre his logical reasoning to have a disjunctive syllogism the way he was setting it up for P or not P. But anyways, who came in? Was this Floyd?
Hey, Steve.
Yeah,
this is Frank McAvoy.
Frank McAvoy, what up, Frank?
How are you?
Yeah, surviving,
Happy
dude.
Easter.
Mazel tov. It's also like two other holidays, isn't it? Beginning of Ramadan? And somebody had asked me, hey Steve, are you having Shaddai? What is this? What's the Jewish dinner? Just Shaddai?
No. It's Passover, Seder.
Seder. Yeah. Ask me what I'm having for Seder, and I'm like, I'm only culturally Jewish, but yeah. It's, how you doing, Frank? What can I do?
I'm doing fine. The thing is, Ramadan is going on right now, but Ramadan cycles through the year.
Yeah, exactly. This is a fixed holiday,
which I always think is funny because one time I heard a news report of a Muslim living in Iceland who was talking about doing Ramadan up there because the sun it doesn't really get dark in the summertime.
Yeah.
And how they going to do their well, I lived in Iceland for a year, and in December the sun comes up at like 6 and sets at 3, so that's not a fast, it's a late lunch.
Yeah, that's true. I do remember what it was real quick. This so I don't lose my train of thought. It was his argument was saying like God or not God explains things. So it was God or not God, not God. Therefore, or not God doesn't explain anything. Therefore, God explains something. And he kind of left out the fact that you can have neither explains things or both could theoretically explain things. He had a false dichotomy, because yes, God or not God, but he made the assumption that if you don't have a God, then the only thing that explains something is God. I'm like, what? No, it doesn't.
Well, I don't know. It's difficult. The one thing I wanted to mention is my take on it is I wrote an essay to myself a while ago called "The Gospel According to Saint Screenwriter," but I won't go into a lot of it. But basically, one insight I got in that is you asked me, what do I think of the characters I dreamt up for my screenplays? And my answer to that would be, well, I think the world of them. I can't imagine life without them. I love writing lines for them. I like it when they do things and say things.
Yeah, you anthropomorphize them, sure.
Yeah, but maybe God looks at us that way.
Well, yeah, but
he likes writing lines for us, and he likes.
But here's the thing, though: we're actually we have tangibility, right? We have concreteness. We have existence. Your characters are fictional. There's a difference
That's
there, right?
true. Yeah, but I know a lot. I know them. They're pretty real to me.
Right, but see, when you say you love that, right? You're what you're doing is you're in love with the concept, right? The object. There's no object there to be had. So I can say, look, Thanatos. Thanatos is the villain. I hate Thanatos. But what I'm saying is I'm hating the concept of Thanatos because there's no object there for my direct hate to be had, because hate is an intentional verb, right? You have to hate something. I hate this. You have to have an agent that can do that. There's an intentional state there. That's why they call it intentional verbs. So the object of that intentionality in your case is just conceptual. It's nothing that has concreteness. There's nothing that's tangible, right? Tangible. Yeah.
Okay. Was that okay? I get it. Okay. I see. I can see the point.
So God's the same way. When they say, well, atheists hate God, one thing, that's a contradiction. But
right,
because if a mesotheist, right, is somebody who hates God, that has to be somebody who actually believes God exists, and clearly atheists don't have that belief. So when I hear Christians making that fundamental logical error, I just think to myself, these are not being honest people, and that's another thing that drives me away from these types of belief systems. When you tell me, atheists just hate God, you're not being rational. The same thing when a young creationist tells me, the earth is 6,000 years old. You're not being rational. You're not convincing me that God exists by telling me the earth is 6,000 years old,
Yeah.
Well, holy crap. Look who showed up here. Hang on, James. No, you'll go finish up, James, and I'll get to Floyd.
Anyway, but I just wanted to wish you a happy Easter. I'm
Likewise,
doing
my
a Vigil
friend.
Mass tonight, and I'll be doing a lot of stuff.
And more power to you, man. Like I said, I know you and I do not agree theologically speaking, but I have the utmost respect for you, and you've always returned it in kind, and I think that thank you for that.
I'm going to beg forgiveness, but you and I both know that's not enough. Thanks, Steve. Thanks for being my friend, man. Awesome.
Wow, here's a blast from the past. I haven't had the honor of talking to for quite some time. Floyd Fp. You're not on camera, by the way. It's just a voice because of the way it's set up. But for people that don't know you, man, you were old school philosophy. You and I go back to the Nadia days. We're going back like 8 years ago. You look great, by the way. They can't see you, but you look great.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah.
Been eating a little better. Lost some weight.
I was gonna say you do look a little thinner than I remember.
Yeah, I cut out a lot of added sugar in my diet, and the pounds just melted out.
I did too, and then all of a sudden I started eating donuts, and I had the sugar craving for the last couple of days, and I feel like shit because I shouldn't have, and I felt guilty, and the sugar and blood sugar, and I gotta go back on my regular diet. But I was like, I'm still gonna have some donuts. But you're right, these refined sugars and carbs, refined carbs like that, not good for you, bro. Not good for you.
Yeah, I dropped 25 pounds, and my family and friends thought I was dying of cancer. I was so thin.
Wow. Yeah, I dropped 20, but I mean, it looked normal on me because I had a belly there for a while. But anyways, so dude, what do you got way in here? Because I know you've talked about these topics extensively. You and me and Ozzy, especially. Wow, back in the day, had some great conversations.
Yeah, and a popular argument now with like Darth Dawkins and his minions like Jay Robin and so forth is they'll claim that atheists can't be rational unless you can prove that there's no God.
Yeah, but isn't that the same thing that Shaka God used to do, and that's only in reverse though? Remember? Yeah, right. You remember Shaka God pull that kind of nonsense?
Yeah. I mean, and it's you're not rational. Well, to be rational, you don't have to prove it. You just need to have good reasons for it. You can have abductive reasons. You can have inductive reasons. It can be a probabilistic claim. You don't have to have absolute proof. Imagine if I say, oh, I don't believe in Russell's teapot, for example. I mean, it's clearly I don't believe that there's a teapot orbiting.
I clearly believe there's no teapot.
Can you prove that? Have you actually gone out in outer space and
you don't have to
Mars and Jupiter?
Yeah.
No.
Well, what's funny is Bertrand Russell's teapot though is so misconstrued because what he was just trying to show is that if you do suggest something like that, and then you burden shift to the other person saying prove that it doesn't exist, that's what he was trying to get across. But I don't think he did it very articulately. But that's what the burden shifting he was trying to point out. But I don't know if you heard earlier, like when I said, look. When a mathematician says, look, I believe the Riemann hypothesis is true, and they can set out to try to prove it, right? They're claiming that it is true. But you at that point, if you say to them, well, prove it, they're like, well, yeah, I'm trying to, right? But they don't have to prove it to hold the belief to be rational. Why is it so difficult to believe that somebody claims there's God or claims there's no God? Why would it be any different for them? If you can accept that you can believe the Riemann hypothesis is true and claim that it's true without proving it, because that's not their claim, why is it any different than an atheist going, yeah, there's no God? Why would you tell an atheist they have to prove it? I mean, Dawkins it's well, we already know he's a idiot, but whatever.
Yeah, it's just different standards. It's hypocrisy, so forth.
But why do atheists listen to that? Because there are atheists out right now that have listened to that and said, "Well, I don't claim there's a God, I can't prove it." I'm like, well, who gives a shit? In fact, I was going to tell a story, and I got sidetracked so many times, and I keep forgetting. But let me tell the story real quick because you appreciate it. So I had a guy on Facebook recently, and he's like, "Look, I'm 99.99% convinced there are no gods, but I'm not going to make the claim there's no God." I'm like, do you know how irrational you sound right now? Look, if I said to you, Floyd, here's $1, I will bet you get up. Well, actually, you have the dollar, and you say, "Hey, Steve, I bet you this $1 against $1 million or $1 million bucks, and there's a 99% chance that you'll be right." And I take that bet, you're going to believe that you're going to get that $1 million bucks, right? If there's 99.99% chance and you and I make a bet, you are going to believe that you're going to win that bet at 99.99%. If you're not, you're an idiot. Who would say, yeah, there's a 99.99% chance, but I don't believe I'm going to win? That would make no sense. That'd be irrational. Of course you believe you're going to win. Now, they say, what happens if it was that 0.01%? Then your belief was wrong. So what? But you're certainly justified to believe that you're going to win it with the odds of 0.99 probability, right?
Yeah, you have to be very patient with the terminology they use. Like Jay Robbins will say, "How does that follow?" Oh, well, saying "how does that follow" implies you need a deductive syllogism.
What about inductive?
Oh, that doesn't follow, right? Induction doesn't follow.
Sure it does.
Right? Not deductively.
No, it doesn't follow deductively, but I can make an inductive argument that's cogent and strong.
Yeah. Oh, well, that doesn't follow.
Yeah. Well, that's that. But see, you're the precept. As Jeff said, you're the scourge of precept, because you've known their script so well inside and out. You've gone against every precept type of argumentation there is. Jeff says, I don't think Darth Dawkins has ever fully recovered from his debate with Chris. It was funny watching Chris taking Darth's argument and turning it on his head. Yeah, I saw that discussion with Darth Dawkins and Chris Attlee. And you know what's funny, Floyd? Chris has nowhere near the skill sets you have for precept. He's a nice guy. He knows his shit in history and a lot of different topics, but he's not a philosophically, he's not as informed and educated and erudite as you are in the topic. But he single-handedly just decimated fucking Darth. It was brutal. It was fucking brutal, dude. Did you see it?
No, I don't think I did.
Go watch it.
Send me a link.
Go watch it. Godless Coming. Can you find that and put the link in the live chat? But yeah, it's well worth watching because again, the way he didn't approach it like the way you and I would approach it. Because you and I have gone against Darth Dawkins before. We've shown people for years why his precept is bullshit. But Chris really hasn't had that kind of experience with Darth, but he still was able to come in from a totally different perspective and just shut him down completely. And not just by hyperbole, by which you see a lot of atheists use, right? Because a lot of atheists will say, well, I justify the use of induction because it works. And I'm like, oh, stop. It's like, I try to explain to them, look, you can't do that. And then they think I'm the theist. They think I'm the preceptor, dude. When I tell them, look, you cannot justify the use of induction by saying that it works. That's circular reasoning. They think I'm the theist by saying that. And I'm like, no, stop.
Yeah, they need to read some Hume at least,
Yeah. And I'm not a Humean. But at least have a little bit of understanding of the basics of why Hume's induction is an issue. And I don't think that's easily resolved. I've tried to read some papers about pragmatic approach to it, but it doesn't really satisfy what I think is the core issue. But for an atheist to say to Darth Dawkins, and I've heard him do it many times, oh, well, we can justify induction because, the sun's going to come tomorrow. Well, why is the sun going to come tomorrow? Because it has, for billions of years, and we've been seeing it come up every day. Therefore, it's going to come up tomorrow. That's a bad argument. That's a fallacious argument.
Yeah. A lot of this feeds on the psychological need to be certain. To be, to have to have proof that you cannot be wrong in any way.
And
that you
presuppers
have,
pray on that, though. They
yeah,
pray
oh,
on
yeah,
that.
yeah.
And I don't have to have certitude. I was explaining earlier before you came in. Certain things I have certitude about. A equals A, I cannot doubt that. It's indubitable to me. And I know I can't be wrong on it. So it is certain. But the presuppers prey on that epistemic uncertainties that we all have. The fact that most things that we believe are not indubitable. And therefore, these presuppers just will go out of their way to try to cash in on that type of epistemic doubt that we all have. And it's a bullshit tactic. It's no different to me than a God in the gaps type argument. When you say, hey, look, you cannot scientifically explain this, therefore God, that's a bullshit argument. Presuppers are basically just something very similar.
Yeah. The more I think about precept, the more I think it is just a fancy God of the gaps argument.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You know,
I've always thought that.
I can account for X. You can't. That's the God of the gaps.
But they think they can account for God for stuff because they have this direct access to God that knows all things. Therefore, when they say, "Hey, how do you know something?" and you say, "Well, I know it because you have some theory of knowledge, just like that." But most atheists aren't going to get into that information. They're not going to know much about those topics. You and I can do that, but the average atheist is going to say, "Well, a weird thing. How do you how they know this?" Going to answer, "Well, I know this because the sun came up tomorrow," and they latch on that because that's a fallacy, and so. They will say, well, and the atheist will say to them, well, how do you know something? And they'll say, well, God knows everything. And because I have I'm one with God as far as, God is my rock and everything. Therefore, I can know it's true because God has told me that it's true through some whatever means. They'll argue, even if there's no direct revelation, they'll say, well, God has said he's not going to change the laws of the universe. Therefore, I know that the sun's going to come up tomorrow and induction is going to continue to work because God has made a promise that he's not going to change the uniform of nature or something like that, which again, now you're assuming that God's not a liar, but whatever.
Yeah. And he violates it when he does miracles.
Yeah. He can violate it anytime he wants, right?
Yeah. But yeah, God fills in all the philosophical gaps. God is everything that humans aren't. Humans don't have all knowledge. I know. Let's invent a person that's all knowing. Voila, problem solved. Humans change. We fall apart. I know. Let's make an unchangeable being. We're not perfect. I know. Let's create a perfect being. So it solves all the problems.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why I have some issues with the way the Christians have laid out their argumentation, because I agree wholeheartedly with you. It seems to be they're trying to fill in information for things that they cannot understand from a naturalistic point of view or don't know yet. Matter of fact, in my video that I had that I was talking about earlier, one of the things I had said that I think that a lot of people will misattribute to God things that have natural explanations. Right. I mean, we have to assume that some percentage of things that people are attributing to God aren't to God. That has to be a logical assumption. If you have, all these different things that people are attributing to God, not all of them could be the case. Some of them have to be false. Even if God does exist, some of them still have to be false. And so we see over time and time again, most of these things that are attributed to God, we've just seen not be the case. And so you can make a probabilistic argument that, hey, we should appeal to naturalism. That is more likely the case that all natural events have a natural explanation, which is the scientific method. And if people want to go on to full-on ontological naturalism by saying there is no supernatural, they can make that argument and be rationally justified to do it if they understand the topics well enough to make that argument. I'm not an ontological naturalist, though. I don't make that argument, but I think it's perfectly fine for somebody to do it if they have the skill set to do it, right? I just don't hold that position. Are you an ontological naturalist?
I think it's just a more parsimonious position to take.
Yeah, no, and I agree. It's parsimonious. Matter of fact, that's what Oppie argues. That it's parsimonious to the law, the theoretical virtues. It's harmonious. It's simplistic. It's explanatory. It has all these different things that God just doesn't have as far as an explanatory, model, because it's not simplistic. It's not rigorous. It's certainly, to me, if God exists, it makes predictive modeling very, very difficult because God can change the parameters anytime he wants. Oh, I want gravity to be this. Okay.
God's unfalsifiable. Whatever the case is, that's the way God wanted it. It's the exact opposite. It's like, the old joke, like you trip or fall or something, and you say, "Oh, I meant to do that." It's the same thing with God. Whatever happens, God meant to do it that way.
Well, some Christians argue differently. It's hard when obviously the Christians throw in compatibilism, right? Or libertarian free will when especially if you're an independent, what's called for the people on the outside. If you don't subscribe to determinism, if you're an indeterminate person who thinks that we have actual true free will, everything gets gunked up at that point. And so God, it has the ultimate free will, and he can do whatever he wants. Then clearly, if I stub my toe as a gratuitous evil, there was a reason for that. He wanted that to happen. So it goes to the whole gratuitous evil thing. Why did I stub my toe 50 times rather than 49 times? What did I learn from the 50th time? What was the reason? Because if this is the actualized possible world that God wanted, there has to be the reasons for that. And by the way, I think it's Swinburne, but some of them actually argue that this is not the best of all possible worlds. What it is there's a range of possible worlds that God has to pick from, and he just goes in that range. But so Swinburne also argues that God is not a necessary being. He calls it a narrow contingency? What is it? I have the paper somewhere. But
it's been a while since I've read Swinburne.
Yeah, but he doesn't argue that God has actualized this world as the best of all possible worlds.
He doesn't Plantinga claim that this is the best of all possible worlds, which is a joke. Isn't heaven supposed to be the best of all possible worlds? This is not heaven. So how can you say this is the best of all possible worlds?
I'll give him benefit of the doubt. When Plantinga's claiming that this is the best of all possible worlds, he's going to include heaven existing in this possible world, right? Because if there's a set of all things that exist and heaven exists, it's going to be in this extant possible world, right? It's not going to be in some other possible world. Well, actually, it'd be in all of them. Actually, I guess if God is a necessary being, then it seems to me it would have to follow that heaven exists in all possible world, wouldn't it? Would that be entailed?
Well, I think when you have these arguments, everything becomes necessary.
But that's modal collapse, though.
Yeah.
So yeah. I mean, when you get it, and that's some of the problems I run into too. I've thought about that a lot of times too. Is like, wait a minute. If these things lead to a modal collapse and everything's necessary, then there's a flaw somewhere in the system.
But I think the Calvinists are more consistent as far as free will goes. Yes, I think the most consistent theology is hyper-Calvinism, where they're fatalistic and
but that's all predetermined. Yeah, that's super determinism, though. It's not super determinism, that's a physics thing. But I mean, they're hyper deterministic in that they say that you are going to go to hell or heaven long before you were even born. This was already determined. It's fatal. It's fatalism to an extreme. You cannot do anything that's going to change your inevitability.
Yeah, and
you're the reprobate or you're elect. That's it. Period.
Yeah, and the problem with most Calvinists are not hyper-Calvinists. In fact, moderate Calvinists think hyper-Calvinists are heretics, mm-hmm. or just wrong.
They can't agree on each other on these more extreme ideologies, and they expect the non-believer to go, okay, I'm going to pick one of these. That's why I think that they're all wrong. I think if God exists, God's going to be a creature or an entity that's going to be so unlike anything that anybody's had any kind of understanding of.
Yeah, and that would be my debate with Matt Slick. He's a moderate Calvinist, and I would just point out the problem with moderate Calvinism. Hyper Calvinism is a lot more logically consistent because that's where it leads to. If God's sovereign, if He controls everything is totally deterministic, mm-hmm. and
according to His will,
mm-hmm. right? And moderate Calvinists, they're more compatibilists. And they somehow think that man is still responsible for our actions, even though God predetermined it all.
And that's a problem as well when it comes to like the responsibility of a moral agent, right? One of the things about compatibilism is even with compatibilism, there's a question there: are we culpable for our moral actions if there's some degree of influence, right? Because let's say like our brains have been fried to the point where we do something that is unethical. Is there moral culpability there? Obviously, people that are insane cannot be judged according to the same rules because they're deemed mentally unwell, right? And so they're not held morally accountable for their their crimes or moral moral, what do they call them? Wrongdoings. Let's say wrongdoings. But if we're deterministic of some kind, right, and we have no other choice, especially in a fatalistic point of view, then how are we culpable for anything we've done if it's already determined? If I'm determined to commit a crime, right, if it's already been predetermined, if it's already either fatalism, which is not the same as determinism, but if it is fatalism, then how am I to be judged on something that I have no ability to have any other way?
Yeah. And the libertarians make a poor argument. They say, "Oh well, if determinism is true, why should we lock up any criminals? Because it's not their fault."
Same thing, yeah. Even in our criminal system, right?
Well, it is their fault. They did it, but if you.
But it could be another way. Why should it be punished if it's deterministic?
Well, Matt, if you have a programmed robot, okay, a robot just did what it was programmed to do.
So blame the programmer, which had been God.
Right, exactly. That's the whole problem with modern Calvinism.
Right.
But what would we do with this dangerous robot? Well, we would at least lock it up, right? Well, isn't that what we do with criminals?
Yeah.
We lock them up. So what's the problem?
Yeah, no, I agree with that too. I think people are responsible for their actions. I don't think that even if there's deterministic I am a soft determinist. That doesn't mean we don't have moral culpability. A hard determinist has I think a lot more difficult time to argue for moral culpability. And a fatalist, I don't know how they would argue for moral culpability. As you said, it'd be all on God.
Yeah. And, and to say, oh, well, we're not responsible for it. Well, I think they're kind of implying some sort of substance dualism there, that, that we're somehow separate from our bodies. No, we are our bodies. We did it. There's nothing else.
Okay, let's assume
there's a chain reaction. There's a chain of causes which made us do something, but it still came through us.
Yeah, but I reject substance dualism, and I'm pretty sure you do too.
I do too.
All right, so even if that's the case, so let's go argue in. Let's say there is substance dualism. I personally, I don't know if you know it, but I do tend to more what's called monistic, neutral monism.
Yeah.
Okay, that's. I'm bland. Okay, I'm vanilla in philosophy or property dualism. Either one. To me, they're almost very similar. But it's still a form of non-reductive physicalism or emergentism. Anything like that, I'm cool with. It's just, but substance dualism, as you said, I reject outright. But let's assume that it's true. If you have you that's you in the mental states, and you have you that's you in the physical states, what's doing the unethical thing? What is doing the impermissible act? Should you be punished for the physical? How would you punish the mental if it's a different type of substance? So we're talking about a metaphysical punishment as far as hell for you doing something wrong. In this case, you haven't accepted Christ, therefore God has deemed that to be such morally egregious that you have not believed something that'd be worthy of eternal torment. But he's punishing your mental. Your body's not going to be there any longer. The physicality is gone. So in that case, is that why you think that a lot of the theists will subscribe more to substance dualism, because the mental's being punished rather than the physical? Roundabout way of putting it, but I think you got my gist.
I mean, there's different views. I mean, there's some pretty sadistic views of hell, like where your flesh gets burned away and then it grows back for it to get burned again.
Yeah, I think that's all bullshit.
Yeah, and that goes on for eternity.
That would be that's not a god. That's a devil. I mean, that's an evil being that set that kind of system up. I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, yeah, they come up with the most sadistic things.
But they do that for fear, though. But as I say, you weren't here when I first started talking about this. So I started talking about, look, Jesus suffered all this stuff, but look at the people that happened in Dachau and Auschwitz and Buchenwald and all these different concentration camps in World War II. These people went through absolutely hell on earth. They have suffered more than any probably human ever in their lives in the concentration camps, and yet most people don't know any of their names. And yet here we are on Easter Sunday talking about a guy that suffered for a couple of days.
Yeah, I read that many Jews are atheists now.
I think so. They're culturally Jews, but I think a lot of Jews have gone to the point where they don't think there's any God, but they still like the culture. I like the Jewish culture. Mm-hmm. I'm a big, I'm a big fan of culture, some of the Jewish culture. But my mom, she she believes there's something. I wouldn't say she believes there's a God per se. The way she explained it to me once was basically she's always felt like something was there guiding her throughout her entire life, right? So she believes that whatever that force is, whatever that has been there for her, she's going to call that a God. But I don't think she interprets it in a way that like the Jewish God personas would be, because she's not religious.
Yeah. Who knows? Maybe some sort of panpsychism is true. I mean, it's you come up with all sorts of exotic
Well, I'll tell you, there's a resurgence for panpsychism, and I although I don't accept panpsychism, there are some reasonable reasons to accept panpsychism.
Yeah, I mean, consciousness exists, right? The minds exist. It's whether you think they come later in time or fundamental.
Yeah, what's the fundamental particle for that? A monad? I think it's monad. Yeah. So I mean, as far as panpsychism, yeah, I mean, okay. I mean, it solves a lot of problems. Panpsychism does, but it's a mereological approach. And so, for example, I find mereological nihilism extremely entertaining. I'm not going to say convincing, but entertaining, only for the fact that if you have an object, what is that object? It's just a rearrangement of these primitives, right? And so that object in itself doesn't exist unless you have the arrangement of that. So why would panpsychism be any different as far as that? You have the consciousness that composed of these monads, the individual measurement of consciousness. So everything has some kind of consciousness, and when you put them together in the structure of the neurological things in the brain, now you have this phenomenon, this epiphenomenon of consciousness. I think that makes a lot of sense. Not going to say that I particularly subscribe to that, but to me, it kind of raises the questions: why are humans the only one that have that level of consciousness? Why are animals the only level that even have any kind of semblance of awareness? Why does it have to be biological to have those kind of awareness? What if panpsychism is the case, and like this dollar bill here has some kind of consciousness to it as far as the panpsychism, then why don't we see other non-biological entities having some kind of awareness? And they argue that they do. Some people do argue that they do, but I don't see that.
Yeah, I think I kind of see it as you're kind of punning. You're like, oh, I can't figure it out, so let's just say it's fundamental and just leave it at that. And it's like you're giving up. You're giving up on a physical, biological, scientific.
Well, how do you view it? Do you subscribe to non-reductive physicalism? I mean, do you think like the mind is emergent from the brain? Like you have the physical substrate, and because of that, you have this consciousness?
If you held a gun to my head, said, tell me what you really believe deep down, regardless if you're warranted or rational in those beliefs or not. Yeah, I'm a materialist. I'm a physicalist. There's still a lot of mysteries, but yeah, until I can.
Yeah, no, I get that. No, I totally understand that. Yeah, and that's why source dualism throws out the window, and that's why I property dualism fine. Property dualism, everything is physical, but out of that physical becomes this mental property.
Yeah. The mental
supervenes on
emerges from the physical.
Yeah.
The greatest mystery is where did desire come from? I think intelligence, consciousness, and so forth comes from desire to seek out. We need stuff. We need oxygen, we need food, and so forth. The first amoeba has to squirm to get food and so forth. That's a very I don't know if you can call it consciousness, but it's very primitive.
I see people all the time in these forums say, "Oh, the evolutionists believe that man came from amoebas." I'm like, find one source that says that. Of course, they never do, and then they block you or they just call you names or whatever. It's like, okay, but you're an idiot. But I mean, who believes that? Let me ask you this. Okay, go ahead, Floyd.
But if we didn't have desires, we wouldn't have this.
Yeah.
Plants don't have certain abilities because they don't need to. They're static. But as mobile creatures, we evolved all these new senses, and
tactile sensation, response mechanisms. I mean, of course, the plants do have some, but okay. Right. So let me ask you this: if there's one substance, or if it's a neutral substance, and out of that you have consciousness and physicalities or mental processes from the physical state, how is it that I have a mental process? Mental is not causal. Right? In other words, the physical can can cause the mental can supervene on the physical. But the mind-body problem is that, and it does work both ways, but just one direction on this. If I have a thought has no causal power, how does that thought become an action? So me thinking I want to grab my cup, I grab my cup and I do this. Woo, magic. I thought about it. Now, a thought has no causal ability. So how did that thought all of a sudden become something that actually changed the condition in reality? There's been an ontological status change. Well, it's not really. Well, I guess, yeah, I would say it's an ontological status change because something's different in the universe, right?
Yeah, I think it all comes down to physical reaction. I think it's desire. It's desire. Even to overcome boredom is a desire.
Yeah, no, I get that. But
why am I here? Why am I here right now talking to you?
But it's still the mental. Oh, who the hell knows why you do that, Floyd? That was your. No, I'm kidding. But it's still a mental thing. It's like dream has no causal powers, right? So if I have if I dream something, that dream has no ability to cause anything to happen in the physical world, right? Mm-hmm. But we do say dreams exist because at least I treat dreams as they exist. They have no real ontology. They have no real existence. But the way we talk about dreams, you experience something. So the experience is something we talked about that has some kind of existence. But how does that mental state make something happen? The dream is inert. So to me, saying that the mental can cause physical as a mind-body problem is just as difficult to try to explain as saying I had a dream and that dream caused something to happen. A dream caused a book to fly off the shelf. There has to be some kind of causal relationship there. See what I'm saying?
Yeah,
it's a hard problem, and that's where the God of the Gaps comes in. That's where they come in and say, "Whoa, God," but I'm still like, how does God solve that problem?
The brain is just a constant feedback loop. That's what I think what's going on, and a lot of stuff's out of desire. I remember, what is it, the Christmas? What's the Scrooge story? I forget what it's called. Christmas
Night
Carol
Before Christmas,
Christmas
Carol.
Yeah, Christmas Carol. He sees one of the ghosts, and Scrooge, comments, you could just be the bad food I ate for dinner. That's what's causing me to hallucinate this ghost in front of me right now. It's just something bad that I ate.
But
I think there's a lot of truth in that.
But here's the thing: that's the physical doing the mental, right? And there's some issues there too as far as the mind-body problem. But at least that is you can say to yourself, look, the physical structure of the brain is causing some kind of mental process. It's still hard to get to that because a delusion, your brain is having a malfunctioning, right? If I'm having a delusion, my brain is processing something incorrectly, and I'm having a mental state that's not comporting with reality. That's really what a delusion is. An illusion is something similar, where your mind, your brain isn't processing something, but you're not treating it as fact. You're not treating it as a belief. When I see an illusion and I know it's illusion, I'm not treating it as something that I know to be the case, as like a delusion where your mind is seeing something that's just not quite there. So, yeah, the brain can make those mental states occur from the physical state. Again, how, it's still questionable, but it's a little bit easier to say, okay, I ate some bad food. The food did this. I had these hallucinations. But your brain still has to make those hallucinations conscious for you to experience it, which is unexplainable so far. But the other way, to me, I think is even worse. How do you have a delusion cause any kind of physical change? But we know the mental can affect the physical. We know people that think things can cause physical reactions. We know that the placebo effect will work. We know that even physical, the mental can cause physical pain, even physical afflictions, right? So it's hard to explain how a mental condition that is non-causal can create a change in the physical. That's the mind-body problem. And I think that a lot of theists out there try to use those difficult philosophical questions to convince the non-believer, okay, well, this is explained by God. But I got to tell you, as a non-believer, God doesn't explain those things.
Yeah. You can't. Something I point out to theists all the time is theism cannot explain consciousness. And they say, well, wait a minute. Sure. Our consciousness comes from God, who's conscious. No. You're not listening to my question.
Yeah, exactly.
Account for consciousness. well, God is conscious. No, yeah, right. God is conscious.
Doesn't account.
Account for God's consciousness.
Doesn't explain it.
It's you're not explaining consciousness.
Right.
You cannot explain consciousness by appealing to another consciousness.
Right. It's not, it's circular. And so when we were talking about accounting, that's asking for a medical physical explanation. And when you're saying, okay, God is a consciousness, okay, that's not it's not a metaphysical explanation of how we have a conscience. You're just appealing to something else that has a conscience. That's all.
Right. You made the problem worse.
How does God have conscience? He's divinely simple. He's not even comprised of anything. How does he have a conscience?
You compounded the problem. Not only we're trying to explain how physical beings like us have consciousness, now you need to explain how immaterial things like God has consciousness.
Right.
You just made the problem worse. You didn't solve any problem.
Yeah, not only is God immaterial, but God is divine simplistic. And so there's no parts to him. So what is it that creates that consciousness? It's pure thought.
Yeah. I find the divine simplicity kind of odd, especially if you're a Trinitarian. How can you think God is divinely simple?
It's a contradiction.
And yet you believe in the Trinity.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. And even
the Trinity itself doesn't make much sense.
Oh, it's an incoherent concept.
It gets worse with divine simplicity.
Yeah. Okay. So even with divine simplicity, you have this being that has no parts to it, that is all these attributes to it, these omnipresent and omniscient and omnibenevolent, all these other things. To me, and again, I'm not the first to come up with this argument. This is actually something that Jack Ainstrike, your friend, and somebody I've known a long time ago, he remember he was developing the argument that God is just cannot have intentional states. Remember that argument that Jack was working on? That God, being a pure being of thought, has no intentional states to him.
Yeah. Well, some theologians will claim that God has no propositional knowledge, which I find essentially they're turning God into like a Platonic form.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's some archetype Platonic being, but has no. I mean, Plantinga is one of those people that kind of has some weird views on the divine nature of God.
Yeah, some of these theologians, they talk about there was a term, apothetic God. It described God and what it's not.
Yeah, in terms of negative, apothetic God. Yeah. You're describing God by negative attributes. God is not this. God is not jealous. God is not. Yes. It's called negative theology.
Yeah, right. And Robert Price makes a good point, saying you're taking the personhood out of God. That's not the God of the Bible.
Yeah,
the God of the Bible, is a person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's an entity that modeled us after himself.
Right. Mm-hmm. Right. So
negative theology takes all that away. It's a completely different way of looking at God. Is not what God it is. God is not defined to be this, this, and this. In that structure of negative theology, God is defined as what he's not. Right.
Yeah. So Blaise Pascal was right, where the God of philosophers is not the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. It's the God of philosophers is not the God of the Bible.
Not by any means. And I'm fine with Spinoza's God or the God of philosophers. I think that that's not a type of God that has an agency, right? So if people appeal to Spinoza's God, they're not theist.
Yeah. And then these Thomists, God is just
Thomist.
God's just pure actuality.
Yes,
he's all output.
He's all actuality. And no. Well, the Thomists basically will say that God being all actuality can make any potential anything that's possible, he can actualize, right? But going back to the whole modal collapse thing, anything that S5 axiom and logic, anything that's possible is necessary that must be necessarily possible. Therefore, you could basically you could have a lot of interesting arguments with modal logic and S5. That's what the modal ontological argument depended upon. And so, if God is this actualized being, he should be able to do anything. He can actually, he's actually. It's like, what is pure actuality?
Yeah, and I guess he has no limits, but obviously he.
That's what I'm saying. It would be. That's the point. It seems to be most Christians I talk to say, look, God has to do what God is only able to do logically, right? Within his essence, within his nature. But when you start talking about more of a Thomistic approach where he's all actuality, it seems to me is more than just what he's able to do. It is, he can do literally anything. And that was actually something the theologians came up with on the principles of eternal verities, to say, hey, if God can do anything, he can cease to be. If he wants himself to cease to be, that he could. But wait, no, God can't cease to be because he's necessary, he must exist in all possible worlds. This presented a problem. This presented a contradiction. So they just basically said, no, okay, God can only do what is logically possible. But this Thomist approach that I when I hear it, just to me reeks of this pure actuality that's able to do anything that's have a potential state, regardless if it's logically possible or not. But again, the way Thomas speak to me, it's a unique language unto themselves.
Yeah,
very difficult language to learn.
I think that's a big part of philosophy is just trying to figure out what these other philosophies mean when they say stuff.
Oh God, I explained Numenon to somebody the other day. I was going to lose my shit.
Yeah, it's trying to understand their terminology and language and so forth. You spend most of your time just doing that. And then,
it sucks, man.
That's what I do now with presuppositionalism. I spend a lot of time reading Gordon Clark and Van Til and Bahnsen, because you really got to dig into their heads.
And I can't stand that stuff. And Bahnsen was the one that actually said, presupposition was basically there just close the mouth of the non-believer. I mean, it's just I don't even bother with that stuff. I mean, I over the years I got more into epistemology. More I got into like these kind of stuff. But I mean, you remember 8-9 years ago, all this stuff was just coming on the scene. I had a little bit of philosophy before then, but not much. But it wasn't until these other people started coming on the scene, running these precept scripts, where I was just like, no, I do want to learn this more. I want to be able to argue against them, because they're just sticking in my craw of what they're saying, and it just makes no sense. But to the people that didn't take the time to learn this stuff, they convince people, and I think it's dishonest. I think that their approach is dishonest, and they've dishonestly convinced people to believe things by ill-gotten means, and it's like lying for Jesus. Darth Dawkins is a liar for Jesus.
Yeah, it's a shell game, and the ones who have studied it more know it. So that makes them more dishonest. A lot of these presuppers, they don't even realize what they're doing. They're just following a script,
right?
They don't realize what they're doing. But
you get them off that script, and it's fun as hell, though. You and I, oh my God, come on, we've had some fun presuppers back in the day.
Yeah, Gordon Clark is actually the easiest to read out of the three of those guys: Van Til, Bahnsen, and Clark. And Clark is probably the most logically consistent. He's more of a hyper Calvinist. Because he wants to be totally logical. So wherever that leads,
and I respect that. Look, I expect a logically consistent system that might be wrong than an inconsistent logical system that has errors and contradictions all over the place. Look, because I mean, you might be going down this path, and you're going, I'm navigating this path, and it might be very strict, it might be very deterministic, but you're not allowing all these other things to jump into your epistemology, and so I kind of respect that. But this is how philosophy is. You pick a lane and you kind of run with it and see where you end up with. You want to go with modal realism? Okay, great. Let's go see where that lead up to. You want to go to moral realism? How about that? That's fine, right? People say, look, I'm a moral anti-realist. I'm like, okay, what does this entail? But as you and I know in philosophy, when you start going down a path, some things will be very congruent with what your belief is, and then many things will be incongruent, and it produces this awkward tension, because you cannot be both positions at once. So you're like, okay, what position am I going to go with? Do I accept moral realism? Do I accept moral anti-realism? Where does this take me? And these are what philosophers lay awake night thinking about, because I should the fuck do a lot.
Yeah, I noticed with a lot of the academic philosophers like Alex Malpass, is they don't commit to a position.
I bugs me about Alex though when he does that. He's so non-committal.
Yeah, like if you ask him about, what about this? What about that? Well, they'll very quietly and methodically explain the position to you and so forth, but they'll never give their position.
He might say he'll say I've heard him say he'll tend to or lean to one direction or the other.
Yeah, and some of his
very
language,
non-committal.
I think it's kind of lazy. He's kind of hard to understand.
I love Alex Malpass, his flaw, but I agree with you. He's very, very non-committal, and I've always noticed about him. And true, he's so smart that he's way up here sometimes, and he's very difficult to follow. Matter of fact, I don't know if you remember, but he had a discussion with William Lane Craig, and that was on future perfect versus simple perfect as far as set theory and if actuals infinities. And I listened to that, and I look, I'm not a fucking idiot, but I'm not goddamn PhD in philosophy, but I'm listening to this going, what the hell are they talking about?
Yeah, I started zoning out.
I had no idea, but you know me, I want to learn. So I'd asked Alex, I was like, Alex, okay, look, I'm not trying to be a dipshit here, dude. I didn't say that to him, but I'm like, can you just kind of give me a brief overview of what the hell you were trying to explain to William Lane Craig? Because I want to be able to apprehend this because it was so far over my fucking head, and I hate that, right? And he told me, he goes, well, our discussion wasn't for like the non-philosophical people. They both recognized they were talking at a very high level, right? Okay, fair enough. And then he explained it to me, and I shit you not, dude, it took me 3 days to process this fucking information. And I wrote a blog on it. I wrote a blog on what he was trying to, because I wanted to make sure that I understood it well enough to explain it to other people, because that's what I do on the Non Sequitur Show. I try to understand something, then explain it to everybody else. And I wanted to see if I had the ability to do that. So I wrote my blog on the modalities that they were talking about as far as the logic, and I had Alex read it. I also had Dr. Josh Rasmussen read it. If you remember Josh?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah. Josh didn't have any problem with it, and Alex basically said, "Yeah, you got the gist of it down." Thank Jesus, right? I was like, I wasn't going for perfection. I recognized that I probably wasn't perfect in the explanation. I thought I got about 80%, 85% the way there, but I was proud that I got that far. That Alex didn't go, "Yeah, because I was afraid you just screwed the pooch on that one, Steve." But yeah, it's not easy level stuff because they don't explain it very well, I don't think.
It takes time to digest it.
Yeah.
You really have to just sip it in slowly and really, really understand it.
But they're so smart. I mean, it's super hard, and people will underestimate William Lane Craig. He knows his shit. They don't have to like him, right? They can think he's dishonest and he just does it for the accolades, or as far as like the debating stuff. He just wants to win the debate. But anybody who thinks William Lane Craig doesn't know philosophy is deluding themselves.
Yeah. No, you need to be prepared with them. Craig has read Bertrand Russell and so forth. He's he's well read.
He's very well read.
So you can't take him lightly. To get back to the mind-body problem, though, I kind of lean towards epiphenomenalism.
Epiphenomenalism, what I lean to as well.
Yeah. But
again, non-committal. We're it's the same thing, because I'm not going to commit to anything. I mean, maybe that I will. I think right now, if I said push kind of shove, I'm going to say, look, I believe it's epiphenomenal. Real quick, Scholar Scummer for £5 says, there are a few people who I lost it when I posted on Twitter that I converted to Christianity and talking to Darth Dawkins. That was April 1st. And I saw that. I remember that. So Jeff had said that he converted to Christianity, and him and Chris Attlee got into this fake feud. And one of the Christians were joining in and going, "Oh, hey, brother, you're with us now," blah, blah, blah. And other people were like shitting on Jeff, going, "You traitor, you had us all fooled that you were an atheist."
Yeah, if you can put me to that debate, I can only stomach so much of Darth Dawkins, but
oh yeah, guys, come put the link in the video description if you can. I mean, in the live chat. It's worth watching him and Chris Attlee go at it, because Chris Attlee was having none of it, man. I can't listen to Darth any longer. I haven't for years.
Yeah,
dude.
I stopped because it's the same old stuff, and a lot of atheists make really bad mistakes against him.
But that's what he gets off on, right? He enjoys that. He knows there are okay. You and I want, it sucks because people don't grasp this. I want to help atheists become better at atheism. Okay? That's why I have a show called Atheological A-Holes. Okay? That's the intent of the show, is to have atheists learn some basic philosophy. You're not going to become a super genius in philosophy. I will never be a super genius in philosophy. I know basic shit. But enough to at least say, okay, this is how I understand it, and then maybe you can go look at it and learn more from it. Okay? But these atheists that go after Darth Dawkins, most of them have no idea what the fuck he's talking about, and they make the most puerile, jejun's basic mistakes, and then he gets off of that because he looks at them, "Well, you're just an idiot," and he's not wrong. He's not wrong in that. And it's like, why would you give Darth Dawkins, this ego boost, but instead of learning it where you can easily assail his shit?
Yeah, he gets off on it
because he does. course he does.
Yeah.
You know, and people put that on me too. And it's like, no, I don't get off on it. When I go in these Facebook groups and I say something that's not even non-controversial and they say I'm wrong, I just want them to understand why I'm not wrong. And they're like, they're running a script. I'm like, no, this is basic logic here, man. But they, you know, yeah, maybe it's a little bit, I'm not gonna say it's like 100%. I don't. I'm like, okay, I'm enjoying this conversation because like this person is like completely wrong, and I know they are. Maybe they'll turn it around. I have hope. I have hope sometimes, right? But most of the time that hope is dashed to bits, and I feel worse than when I started. I'm like, fuck, you know, I just it's like sucks.
Yeah. Yeah, to plug my really small YouTube channel,
Yes, please.
which is really small. One argument that I hear it over and over again, especially with presuppositionalists, but I hear it from like apologists from like Frank Turek and so forth, is what's called the argument from reason. C.S. Lewis made it popular, where, you know, if we're just moist robots, like Frank Turek says, and we're just governed by the laws of physics, you know, why should we trust our thought processes? Or, you know, how can we be rational and so forth? And that's something that C.S. Lewis made popular, and philosophers ripped Lewis apart back in the 40s when he introduced that, and actually that was kind of like the beginning of his end.
Well, you know, and it's funny because again, modern philosophy has been through all this stuff, right? When C.S. Lewis, who by the way is a great author, I would love Chronicles of Narnia, but when he wrote some of this Christian stuff, these were back a long time ago, and I think we've come a long way since then. But we don't think of ourselves as this automatons, right? We you know, we're not these pea zombies. Sure, you can argue that certain things are deterministic, but I think the philosophy of mind has come so far than it was back in those days that we can say, no, look, we might be materialistic. We could be completely materialistic, but there could be a consciousness property that comes out from that. And that consciousness is still something that has existence in some capacity. We're still phenomenological. Can we explain it? Not quite yet, but that doesn't get you to God. And I think that there's a mistake that people made when they argue, look, we're just, you know, these robots with, you know, neurons. Well, no, I think it's much more than that. But why these material arrangements? Why the way the primitives and the atoms and the neurons come together to have these chemical relationships to allow us to have thought? Who the hell knows? That's one of the mysteries that we still haven't solved yet. But that's what scientists try to do. That's what, you know, these people that want to know these things, why? But you can't just jump to somehow there's a God there, because that is a faulty conclusion. God, it doesn't get you to God, because God would have to say, look, I exist, I did it this way, and this is how it works. Then you have an understanding of it. But we can't ask God how he did any of that stuff.
Yeah. But I have a part 4 of my critique of presuppositionalism, where I deal with this argument because I see it over and over again. Frank Turek uses it. You know, Alan Plantinga has his, you know, evolutionary argument against naturalism, which is, you know, a variant of it. Even William Lane Craig has argued against determinism because, you know, he believes in libertarian.
Yeah, he's an indeterminist. He subscribes to a Molinism.
But he
middle knowledge. Yeah.
Right. And but, you know, I find the whole thing about libertarian free will this odd. You know, the idea behind libertarian free will is that, you know, we are the first cause of our actions and thoughts and so forth. You know, if we do an immoral act, well, where'd that come from? Well, it came from us. We're the first cause of it. But there's this whole history of our evolution and our biology,
right,
and so forth. You know, just look the fact. Just look at all the sexual immorality that has occurred over history, and so forth. If we weren't sexual beings, that wouldn't have happened. You know, and to say, you know, that there's no causal influences, and there's no pre-existing causes that brought about, you know.
Yeah, of course there's I cannot imagine in any good reasoning that we are completely autonomously able to make decisions free of undue external or internal influence. There's no possible way. I would completely and utterly reject libertarian free will.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean we don't have will. That means we still can make decisions. We can still decide. And we have choice. Now, I think most of it is dostastically inferred. I think we have dostastic involuntarism, where most of our thought process happen subconsciously, and we basically come aware of it later on. But it's still choice.
Yeah, but a lot of Christians and are believing free will because they have to, because it's part of their theology. Man has to be culpable for our sins. We can't say God is responsible for it. So only the hyper Calvinists will bite the bullet and say, yes, God determined everything. He controlled everything. He set everything up. He's the ultimate cause. But a moderate Calvinist like Matt Slick will say, oh no, God is not the author of evil, even though he foreordained and decreed everything that humans would do, which makes no sense. In their doctrine, if you read like the Westminster Confession of Faith, they'll say God controls everything. And they use the word "yet" a whole lot. God does this, yet humans are still responsible for it. But there's no explanation for why.
Blame God. Blame God. It's all his fault.
Yeah, I read a book from Gordon Clark where he goes into detail about this, saying he's basically shooting down moderate Calvinists, saying they're full of shit, they're logically inconsistent, and so forth. And he says God is ultimately responsible for everything, but he's going to explain why God punishes humans for their sin. I said, I can't wait to hear his explanation. And he gets to the very end of the book and just says humans are still responsible, and
with no rhyme or reason, just
no explanation. Yeah. And I was like, what is this? They never explain.
I hate that kind of argument, because it's not an argument. It's just
it's asserted.
It's just A to B, go to Z. It's just, it doesn't get, it doesn't, there's no causal line of reasoning. And to me, I like step by step. I'm like, okay, this gets you there.
Basically the argument is, because the Bible says so. And Calvinists,
it's not a fallback. It's not a fallback.
They'll criticize non-Calvinists who criticize Calvinism and say, "Oh, what you're doing is you're taking Calvinism to where it logically leads." But but in the Bible, but we're biblical. And the Bible says this: there's guardrails where biblically it says man is responsible. But yes, I am taking your theology where it logically leads. That's what theology is all about. It's trying to make logical sense out of your paradigm.
Yeah.
And you're just admitting it's not logical. You just admitted that. If you say, oh no, we can't take it where it logically leads. We just have to listen to what the Bible says. And they'll say, oh well, God will explain it. When we're in heaven. We'll
exactly. Yeah, we'll know then. But but what, again, going back to the main point of this episode, why I'm not Christian, I want to know now, and because I don't have that information now, I don't think I should be punished to have based upon the lack of information. Right. And so I'm not Christian. I'm not Muslim. I'm not. I'm only Jewish culturally. So when I say I'm Jewish, I mean I'm referring to the culture, not the religion. And so, I mean, as an agnostic, that's been my position for a very long time. And so, I think that this weekend, people should kind of reflect on themselves what their beliefs are and try to justify them. I can justify my position. I can justify my position of agnosticism. I know a lot of weak atheists that don't justify their position very well at all, and it sucks because they logically are agnostics on the proposition. And they don't seem to understand that. They are the same. They're sitting on the exact same fence that I'm sitting on, and they don't get it.
Yeah. Well, again, the way you should label yourself is, again, if someone sticks a gun to your head and it says, "Tell me what you actually believe." I don't need to know the reasons for it, if you're good or bad, and so forth. Just tell me what you believe. In your heart of hearts, what do you actually believe? That is the position that you should hold.
Yeah, well, I believe that I don't have really enough information to say God does or doesn't exist. I wish I could. As far as like an overall, I wish I could. I can't. I just don't feel like I'm justified to do that. But for example, like the hell, I do feel like I'm justified to say, look, there is no hell. Like this fire and brimstone type hell, as like you're describing, your flesh burns off, grows back. That doesn't exist. I'm convinced of that. I can make a justification for all that. Right. So I'm very astute of what I believe and what I don't believe and what I can justify and what I can't justify. And I wish more atheists and theists and agnostics, whatever your theological position is, they take the time to try to rationalize why they have that position. Because when somebody tells me, look, I'm 99.99% sure there's no God, but I'm not going to claim there's no God, you're irrational. You do not have, you're trying to defer to this open-mindedness and think you're all being virtuous, to have virtual epistemology, to have this, oh, I'm leaving room for doubt. No, you're not. You are being irrational. And so I think everybody needs to just take a step back, reevaluate your positions. Say, look, if I'm 99.99% sure or convinced that there is no God, then yeah, I'm going to say there's no God. But I'm not at the 99.99%. I think anybody over maybe 70 or 80, two standard deviations maybe of 95% is more than enough. One standard deviation of 6.7 is probably sufficient. But if you're telling me you're 6 standard deviations over, and it, which is what 99.999998 or something. If you're that convinced and you don't believe it, you're irrational. You're irrational because you don't have to have 100%. That's the theist trying to. It's so funny you mentioned that earlier. Theists are trying to get atheists to think you have to be convinced, and they're buying into it. Atheists are buying into theist bullshit, and they don't get it. They're not understanding. They're being misled by theists, and I'm giving them correct information as the agnostic. And yet I'm the bad guy.
Right. Yeah. Again, they'll say, "Oh, that doesn't follow unless it logically follows. You're irrational. You need.
And I'm sorry, it's like they're way over trying to utilize deductive reasoning because we don't acquire new information from deductive reasoning. We get new information from inductive reasoning. So most of what we do is inductive in nature. Deductive is great for certain things, but deductive doesn't really get you anywhere. Just rearranging what you have.
That's where you need to stop them and say, okay, let's take a step back and let's talk about what it means to be rational. Let's define rationality first. Do you have to? The only way to be rational is have a deductive syllogism to prove
that's logical positivism, though.
Yeah.
I mean, that's nobody can function like that. I have people even tell me that exact same thing. I only believe things I can prove. No, you don't. Shut the fuck up.
You hear people like Aaron Ra.
That's bullshit to extreme. I'm like, I hear somebody tell me that. I'm like, you've never read a philosophy book in your life. There's no fucking way you could possibly live your life like that you only believe something you can prove. That's nope. That's just wrong. I'm sorry. And so, I hear that kind of nonsense. So anyways, I don't know if you've watched the show that I do on Sundays called Atheological A-Holes. You should check it out. You might like it.
No, I don't think I
I do. I usually do it every Sunday. I'm not going to, I don't know if I'm going to do it tomorrow because I decided to do this today on the Easter Vigil, Virgil or whatever they're called. But I usually have a co-host, but sometimes I just do it solo. But I just pick a topic. Like I did modal logic with Real Atheology's Ben Watkins. Great guy. And I'm going to have Scott Clifton on.
Oh yeah, I like him. Yeah, theoretical bullshit. Yep. Yeah, he's good.
And so
he had a good discussion with William Lane Craig. I thought that was pretty good.
Yeah, I haven't watched it. I've been meaning to. I know that they did, and I haven't watched it. I feel really bad.
That's worth watching.
That's on the Kalam, wasn't it?
What's that?
It was on the Kalam.
Just on the Kalam. Yeah. I thought that would.
Yeah,
that was
the next episode I'm planning to do is going to be on the what's negation and deny and non-acceptance. There's a really good paper out there that I've had in my possession for a very long time that is recently kind of reread a little bit, at least the first half of it. The second half I don't understand, but the first half, it's kind of like all papers. I get through half of papers. Like when I read like Ernest Sosa's The Raft from the Pyramid, I get through half of it, and after that I'm like, I'm done. I'm going to go over this paper with Josh Garver, who is a mathematician. But we want to explain to people what it means in logic or reasoning to say, I reject a proposition. I deny a proposition. I don't accept a proposition. I believe it's false. These all have usages in terminologically speaking in the literature. And so when people tell me, look, atheism is the rejection of atheism, I try to explain to them what rejection means to believe false, and they're like, oh, you're just making that shit up. No, that's how it's understood in the literature. Don't shoot the messenger, man.
Yeah.
So
Well, you're being asked, what is your position on this proposition?
Yeah.
If you say, "Oh, I lack any belief in that," no, I'm not. That's not the question I'm asking you. I'm asking you, what position do you hold in regards to this proposition?
And they don't answer. I've noticed something, and I got to wrap this up soon. But I noticed a lot of lack belief atheists don't like answering simple questions. I've always noticed this. I don't get it. It's the same thing that I find from Young Earth creationists and on the other side of the fence. I had a guy just a little while ago. He was asking me, well, can you prove to me that an animal can grow a new organ? I'm like, well, that's not what evolution teaches. So show me an evolution that when an animal could just magically grow a new organ, and then I'll address it with you. But I'm not going to argue a straw man, because you have a straw man because you're an idiot. And of course they got, like, oh, you just can't answer questions. Well, it's like, oh, hey, Steve, math says 1 + 1 = 3. Prove it. Well, no, math doesn't say that. Right. And so when I hear an atheist tell me some shit that I know is wrong, it drives me fucking crazy. Because they don't want to answer simple questions that would help them maybe understand their misunderstandings. And so, when I try to explain to an atheist who says, well, I merely lack a belief God exists, and I say, okay, if you don't have a positive epistemic status and you merely lack a belief, you don't think God exists, you're also known as a agnostic in literature and also a weak theist. They're the exact same logical positions. This is proven. I have proven this in logic. Oppie notes it in his work. I've literally proved it using logic. Anybody who wants to go validate that is able to do it. But they hand the wave of that away instead of answering the questions, because if they would simply answer their questions, they would probably try to understand the logic better. But I cannot get a single atheist to come on the program to do that, Floyd, and I don't know why. They will not answer simple fucking questions because they think I'm trying to mislead them, and I'm not. So, if you know of any atheists willing to do it, anybody on the outside there, when I wrap this up, because I'm wrapping that, for example, like my guy, a friend of mine, Michael, says 1 + 1 = 10 in base 2. Well, actually, it's not. It's 1 + 1 = 1 0. 1 0 represents 2. 10. It's not 10, right? So that 1 0 is a symbol that represents the position 2 on the number line. So it doesn't. So when somebody says 1 + 1 = 10 in base 2, and it's hard to say that he's doing that because it's written. But when someone verbally says 1 + 1 = 10 in base 2, they're wrong. It doesn't. Yeah. 1 + 1 = 2. The number 2 in base 2 is just represented by the symbol 1 0. So 1 + 1 = 1 0 is the way you would say it, right? Because it's not 10, it's the number 2. It's just in mathematics. But anyways, I'm going to wrap this up, Floyd. I appreciate you coming on. My voice is shot. Always a pleasure, man. Stick around more often. I talk to you all the time in the great community, but I don't ever talk to you that much verbally, and it's good to hear from you. I'm glad you're doing well.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Yeah, in regards to this topic, why I'm not Christian, plug my mediocre channel again. I have a 3-part series on that very topic, why I'm not Christian. It's 3-part series. Each one's like an hour long. So if people are interested in that, they can
can you DM it to me on Facebook, and I'll put it in the video description.
Sure.
More than happy to. Absolutely. Yeah. If you guys want to learn about precept shit, and I mean, I will go on record to say Floyd is one of the best, if not the best, when it comes to these types of topics for precept. I don't know too many people that's better than you. And it was fun back in the day. You, myself, and Ozzy, and a few other people, we would seriously just go after these preceptors that would do, okay. Do you remember, in Nadia's room, where Dart Dawkins or one of his sycophants would come in and they would find a lone sheep atheist and just kind of pounce on them and try to run their script? And then you had you and Jack Angstripe and other people were just like, oh, okay, Darth, let me jump in. And Darth's like, nope, and he just got scared off. It was one of the great. I love that kind of shit, because Darth was looking for that one atheist that didn't know what they're talking about to get his fix.
Yeah, but it gets to a point where, Darth, it's not a conversation anymore. He won't answer your questions.
There's never been a conversation with him. He's not there to have a conversation. He's there to make the atheist look stupid.
Yeah.
And he does. He's good at it sometimes. And that's why I hate that, and I want atheists to learn the stuff better. So give me your links. I'll put in there. So let me ask the outside chat. Guys, find me an atheist that is a weak atheist that's willing to answer yes or no questions. And they can say, I don't know. I get that, right? But I had my debate with that guy, the Duke, and that dude's still on Twitter to this day, 2 years later, going off on this shit, and everybody's still telling him he's wrong. But he has not let it go. He got so beat in a debate between him and I on the moderated debate, he has never let it go for 2 years. That's bizarre. I don't want somebody like that. Find me a true blue, atheist experience atheist that says, they do not believe gods exist. They are atheist and they want to, answer yes or no questions about the topic. Weak atheism equals agnosticism equals weak theism, because I can prove it logically to them. All weak atheists are weak theists, and they don't get that. They think that's full of shit, and yet it's logic. So rethink your positions, guys, a little bit. As Floyd said, if somebody had a gun to your head, what are your positions? If you're an atheist and you say, look, I merely lack a belief, but your real position is that you think all gods are bullshit, then say all gods are bullshit and not that you lack a belief. Say, look, I believe there are no gods. Because what you're doing is you're retreating to a lesser position, and that's dishonest. Don't do that.
Yeah. Well, so some people say, like, when it comes to belief, you have your belief first, like psychologically, you have your belief first, and then later you look for reasons to support that belief.
Yeah, and I get that. A lot of beliefs are going to be unjustified and irrational when you first have them. Okay, and that's fine. One thing is that atheists have to learn is, one, you're not going to have certitude on everything. You're not going to have certainty on everything. Your beliefs can be wrong. You can be wrong. Who the fuck cares? Just because they're false belief, don't be scared to have a false belief. Don't be afraid to have an unjustified belief. The point, I think, in philosophy is to try to justify as many beliefs as you can, except there's some beliefs that you can't justify, but to be a critical thinker. And I think a lot of atheists want to try to think themselves better critical thinkers than they are, but they end up looking really dumb in front of the pre-suppers and these theists that come in and take advantage of the naivety of these atheists who are not philosophically literate by any stretch of imagination. And instead of like listening to me or Floyd or Ozzy or other people that really do try to help them, we're all of a sudden vilified into the bad guys because Matt Dillahunty and Aaron Ra, doesn't agree with us. And Floyd, you've experienced the same bullshit I've had. You are an atheist, and yet you've seen Matt Dillahunty and Aaron Ra say some pretty goddamn philosophically stupid shit.
Yeah. When I first started listening to Aaron Ra, I thought, oh, this guy's great. He has a great gift to grab.
Me too. Me too.
But then I started listening to his arguments, and I
they're
started
bad.
to cringe, like, ooh,
they're bad.
Ooh.
But if he wants to argue biology, then yes, go for it. I love him on that topic. I'm a huge fan of the foundational falsehoods of creationism. A huge fan of that series. I think he did an excellent job on that. But when he goes outside that purview and he starts having these philosophical arguments, if you ever get a chance, and I'm going to end this on this channel, go watch a review that I did when you may have already watched it, but Aaron had 3 Muslims that he was going against. And it's got about 10 to 11,000 views. He got eviscerated. And yet I guarantee it, dude, a 10-minute conversation with you or I would have prevented all of that from happening. Because it was easily navigatable outside those waters. I know those Muslims. I've talked to them. I know who they are. I know their beliefs. When it comes to the arguments they were having, they respect me. I respect them. I know they know their shit, but they knew that Aaron didn't know what the fuck he was talking about, and they just preyed on that. And Aaron didn't have the epistemic humility to graciously kind of bow out of it, or at least, he just ran full on into it, So
one last suggestion: yes. when you debate, I know a lot of academic philosophers, they're very mellow and they're very slow and so forth. And the reason they do that is they're not reacting. They're actually trying to use the rational part of their brain to process what the person's saying instead of just reacting quickly.
Yes, absolutely, I agree with that. Yes.
So I recommend slow down, count to 3, take a deep breath, and then respond.
Yeah, I see that happening a lot, actually, because a lot of people, what they're doing, and I don't remember who said it, but there's a famous quote. Basically, most people spend their time in a conversation developing what they're going to say rather than listening to what the other person's saying, right? And I think Aaron does a lot of that. He doesn't listen to what the people are saying. He's already prepared for kind of response, but he doesn't actually give a valid response to what the person is saying. He did this exact same thing with this. He was a philosopher, and I don't remember his name, John something or other, if I'm not mistaken. But he was he is a young Earth creationist. But when it comes to philosophy, the guy was actually spot on. And he was trying to explain to Aaron some concepts, but Aaron wasn't having any of it because he was taking it from a biological point of view rather than a philosophical point of view, and he wasn't understanding what the guy was trying to tell him. And it just made him look so bad.
That's one reason.
Go ahead.
That's one reason why I do PowerPoint presentations in my debate, because it gets.
I've seen your presentations. You did on the Non Sequitur show once, I believe.
Yeah, if you get things in writing, it forces you to be logical and methodical. If you just say it off the top of your head, a lot of times you'll go back to it and you say, "Oh, I should have worded that better."
Oh, absolutely. That's why I love writing my blog.
Yeah. But if you type things down and then go back to it and review it and so forth, you really have to iron stuff out. In a lot of my debates, I'll be putting together my argument and I say, "Oh, I know they're going to counter with this," so I have to create another slide to address that, and then they're going to respond with this. So at the end, like I have like dozens of slides, and I only might use half of them in a debate. But I try to I try to lay out every single possibility that the guy.
No, I respect that, dude. That's kind of what I do. So to kind of wrap this up, and I sent you what you asked for, by the way. Like the other day, I posted something in a Facebook group, and when I post something in a Facebook group, sometimes I'm just trying to have a preliminary argument, and I want to see if there's feedback on it where I can shore it up, right? And then if I have a really good argument or I think there's something better, I'll put it in my blog, okay? Because I write my Pre-Am Philosophy blog. And so I test these arguments out. This is how arguments get shored up. This is what you should do. And you know that I'm one of the very few people out there that actually try to create novel arguments. You create novel arguments. Ben Watkins create novel arguments, but a lot of people don't. But by doing so, you're going to have some bad arguments. And so you put it out there. And a lot of people are scared to have bad arguments. And I don't understand why if you're testing out arguments. But I will lay awake at night formulating these things and thinking about them. And then I'll put them down. And so I put them in a Facebook group. And the other day, I had an argument. I had something I was talking about, and one person said something that just triggered something with me. They were like, "Oh shit, this person might have a really good fucking point on this." This person had, and I'm like, I'm not saying that I'm wrong, right? They didn't get that far, but they got me thinking. I'm like, shit, that actually might be worth exploring more. That I'll put in my blog, but I haven't formulated it yet, and I will tell you what it's about. I had made the argument. I remember the argument, and then we'll end it with that. But that's for the outside. I'd kind of run the argument that a tautology, right? And this is not even something that I created, but tautology doesn't give you new information for the most part, right? A tautology is a tautology. If I say, x equals x, it's tautological. It's not giving me any information what x is. There's nothing new there to be had. So if I say, I woke up in the morning to watch the sunrise. Morning's not adding anything to that expression because it's tautological, because sunrise can only be in the morning, right? So it's a tautological expression. So I had argued that saying I do not believe gods exist because I'm not convinced, or I do not believe gods exist and I'm not convinced, is tautological, because you can determine one from the other. The dependent clause can be inferred by the independent clause, and the independent clause can infer the dependent clause.
Yeah, you're saying the same thing.
You're saying the same thing. It's redundant. It's like saying I don't believe because I don't believe. So if you tell me you don't believe, I'm okay. Yeah, Floyd's not convinced. You tell me you're not convinced. Floyd doesn't believe. There's a tautology there. And I said, so it's not adding in new information, because tautologies don't add in new information. But somebody had said this. They said, what happens if a person doesn't know what one of the things means? And I thought about this. I'm like, okay. So expressing it twice as a semantic informational thing to the person, if they don't know what it means, it's only tautological to the person. Well, it's still tautology, but it's not adding any more information if they already know the terms. But if they don't know the terms, then expressing it that way might add some information, because they don't know what one of the. If I say a square is a four-sided parallelogram, right, which is a tautology of the same thing. Well, whatever the. Four equal angles and things of that nature and sides. But I can deduce one from the other. But if you don't know what a square is, and I give you, this other information about it, even though the tautology is not adding anything new, it's giving you information about what a square is, because you didn't know what a square is. But once you know what a square is, you know the other one's true as well, because they're a tautology. So I had to think about that as far as the difference between semantic content and syntactic content. I think that was interesting. But that's one of the very few times in a Facebook group where somebody had made me think some of the distinctions between semantics and syntactic. And I'm like, this is interesting, because even though tautology doesn't add new information, in this particular case, It might if you don't know what the hell the word atheist even represents. So I'm thinking about that still. Anyways.
Well, to go full circle in our conversation,
sorry. I got sidetracked.
Exactly well, we're going full circle right back. That's exactly what Matt Slick does in his God or Not God, right? It's a useless tautology.
It's a useless tautology. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I told him the same thing.
But pre-suppers use it as an explanation. How did God create the universe? Through his universe creating properties.
P or not P is a trivial. Because what he does is this: he says P or Q. Q where he wants, and that way that's a disjunctive syllogism. So he has P or Q, and then for some strange reason, which you're not allowed to do in logic, he takes Q and says, "I want Q to be not P," and then he negates that, not P, therefore P.
Yeah.
But you cannot do it. But it's like, okay, but not God. He says not God doesn't explain anything, therefore God does explain something. Well, not necessarily the case. You can have God that doesn't explain anything, or in theory, both could explain something, but he's leaving out the other option that neither explain anything.
Yeah, he's making a really bad attempt at a transcendental argument. The transcendental argument is it's rather simple. For something we accept as true, something we take for granted as being the case, the claim is there is some necessary precondition for that to be the case. And Matt Slick will say, "Oh, it's about transcendentals." Not exactly. It's just to say that there something is necessary for something that we already accept.
That's all transcendental argument is if X is a necessary precondition for Y and Y is true, X has to be true. In other words, if a car has to have wheels to exist and a car exists, wheels exist.
Right.
It's a transcendental argument. That's all it is.
Right. Yeah. So the law of the argument is like, if I say I'm an a-chairist, I don't believe in chairs. And you say, Floyd, are you sitting right now? And I would say, oh, of course I'm sitting. And so, in my worldview, I can account for your sitting. Chairs exist. Well, how do you account for you sitting, Floyd? Oh, gee, gosh, I don't know. I don't have an answer. But that's the argument for God.
Yeah.
It's like, and it comes down to God of the gaps, and they say, atheists don't believe in God is as absurd as saying that I don't believe chairs exist. That's their claim.
Yep.
And here I am sitting down.
Tom has somebody in his family has cancer. So my condolences to you, Tom. Tom, hope that your uncle fights that off. But yeah, people do need to think after themselves, and I'm gonna kind of leave you guys with that because right, Tom. Life is fleeting. I made the determination when I moved 4 months ago that I was going to have a completely change of lifestyle. And for the most part, I had some donuts the other day, but for the most part, I've been eating better. I've been trying to be happier. I've ignored the fucking shitty people. I've ignored the trolls. I've ignored people that have nothing to do but make people's lives miserable. They don't affect me in real life. And I've been so much more happier. And because life is short, Tom. And so my condolences, and I hope your uncle gets better. This is a Floyd Fp in the call. People can recognize your voice. And I put his video channel in the video description. But I really want people to reevaluate this weekend their positions, or at least justify their beliefs, and think to themselves, what is it they really believe, and why do they really believe it? Are they really Christians? Are they really Muslims? Are they really atheists? Are they really agnostics? What is their actual positions? Why do they have that position? Because, again, I'm just going to harp on it. If you're an atheist, and the only reason you're an atheist is because you don't believe in God, you might want to reevaluate positions a little bit. You might want to really ask yourself, is this really rational? Because I've already determined that it's not. But that's up for you guys to figure out. All right, Floyd, thank you very much, my friend. It's good seeing you. My best to you and yours. And
great, thanks.
Keep in touch. Like I said, if you guys want to join the Great Debate community on the Facebook, it's actually been there for a while. So just type in the Great Debate community on Facebook, and join us. Floyd's in there. I'm in there. Ozzy's in there. A whole bunch of people's in there, and we have great discussions on all kinds of shit. We can run arguments, test things out, and don't be afraid to say, "Hey, look, here's my argument. What do you guys think?" We'll give you feedback, right? Awesome. If they can't see you, just agree. Just agree with me.
Yep,
All
yes.
right. All right. Thank you, man. I'm going to end the call, and I'm going to end the stream, and I want to thank you guys for watching. Like, subscribe, leave comments, and share if you can. I appreciate it. Good night.
Bye.